Class is in session, hitting the books. College football, Ian Cameron and Connor Mack with you Tuesday, September the 3rd. We hope everybody had a good Labor Day weekend. We hope everyone had a good first full weekend of college football, a profitable first week of college football. And I had an all right week. Solid. The best bets were 5-3 for me on Saturday. So I'm not going to complain too much. But I know, Connor Mack, you had yourself a phenomenal first weekend here in college football. And like I said, and the reason why we love doing this show each and every week, and it'll be back on Mondays again starting next week, is that we find like we get our opinions set early in the week, and it kind of makes us, really handicap the card early in the week and get our opinions kind of settled. And it usually, more often than not, provides better results on the betting board over the weekend. So nice to have that first weekend under the belt, CMAC, and a very exciting, entertaining college football opening weekend. Except, of course, if you're Billy Napier and the Florida Gators, Dabo Swinney and the Clemson Tigers, Brian Kelly and the LSU Tigers, and, of course, Mike Norvell and the Florida State Seminoles. Maybe not the greatest weekend for those fucks, but for us, betting and watching college football, CMAC, it was a very entertaining and profitable weekend.
Yeah, it was. It was so good to just be back. Saturday packed full of bets, and having that many bets, that much money on the line. I forgot. It's been too long. But yeah, I had a great weekend. A couple of bad losses. I was on Florida there. UConn. I had the Houston over a little bit, smaller bet on the BC, that over last night, just nothing in the fourth quarter. But I had BC, the points, money line. That ended up great. Same thing the night before with SC. So that was huge. Old Dominion was big, Syracuse team total. Just a bunch of good wins. Sam Houston, La Tech got the cover for me. Those unders were great. Notre Dame, Clemson. So very, very good week. I can't complain. I just got to get to the grind, and we got a shit ton of games, and I'm ready to roll.
We're ready, and it is always a shit ton of games. And as always, we will begin with the weeknight games, but there are only 2 weeknight games this week. Of course, Thursday night, the NFL season kicks off. Ravens and Chiefs. College football takes the night off. They let the NFL have the Thursday night season opener to themselves. So we don't have college football this week until Friday night. But we have 2 games on Friday, starting with this one. It's the BYU Cougars taking on the SMU Mustangs. We've got SMU 10.5-point home favorites, 56 being the total here in this game. SMU with the scare that they got against Nevada in week 0 in their first game, pretty much faced a cupcake last week in Houston Christian, and basically was able to get back on track with a 59-7 destruction over Houston Christian. So there's not really too much you can glean from that. You'll glean a lot from this because with all due respect to Nevada, and I'll give Nevada a ton of credit. I mean, they took SMU to the wire. They went on the road and they beat Troy as an underdog this past weekend. Let's give Nevada credit. It's been a very impressive start to the season for them. But with all due respect to Nevada and certainly Houston Christian, this will be the toughest challenge yet for this SMU Mustangs. A team that people thought had the ability to win the ACC as a dark horse, maybe go over their win total. 2-0. They didn't look impressive against Nevada. They'll have to look better here in this game against BYU. I think when you look at the SMU team, the offense, it took a while to click against Nevada. I wasn't thrilled with the defense, quite honestly, in that Nevada game. Now, again, you can't take much from Houston Christian. And as for BYU, they played a Southern Illinois team out of the FCS ranks in their last game. And if you look at Southern Illinois and their standing or pecking order, if you will, in the FCS ranks, to say they are an elite top level FCS team would be incorrect. So I don't know if you want to give BYU too much credit for a 41-13 victory there in that game against Southern Illinois. What I will say about them is they got Retzlaff, their new quarterback. He played pretty solid. Defense looked good, but again, you have to factor in who they're playing. This is a really tricky game for me, CMAC. Obviously, the last time we saw SMU lay in double digits against an FBS team, I'm not talking Houston Christian last week, but it didn't go well. They barely won the game straight up against Nevada. They are home here. I don't know if I feel strongly enough. I wasn't that high on BYU coming into the season. This is more of I'm gonna sit back. I'm gonna watch, see how this game unfolds. I don't really think I'm gonna get involved, at least from a side perspective. I think based on where the number is right now, I would say there's maybe a little bit of value on SMU. I think you could have made a case maybe they could be slightly higher as a favorite, but what I saw against Nevada, I'm not racing out there to lay 10.5. Could get there maybe with the over here in this game because think about it, SMU defensively, and I'll say it again, against Nevada wasn't great. BYU might be able to move the football. I don't think much of BYU's defense. We saw BYU's defense last year really decline, really have a big arrow down. And this is obviously when they're running on all cylinders, when RJ Maryland's making big plays at the tight end spot, when some of their receivers are going, when Preston Stone's accurate with the football. That can be a very explosive and dynamic SMU offense. And I'm not totally sold on BYU's defense, which struggled last year shutting them down. So I'll have a lean to the over here in this game as well. CMAC, to get us going Friday night, what do you think? BYU, SMU.
Sorry, I'm having a little bit of issues. Yeah, that game was okay. I just wanted to glance at that. I had it earlier. I'm having a little computer issues. They played 2 years ago in December at BYU, 24-23. Just throwing that out there. Yeah, SMU, asleep for those 3 quarters with Nevada. Big fourth quarter, win that game. Hey, look at Nevada. Look at them, a little better football team. They couldn't win last year, but they played some decent football teams to some lower scoring snoozers and covered that we had talked about. So look out for maybe Nevada, but they're on alert now. Maybe we won't get as great points with them. BYU's off the big win. The quarterback had a great day. I thought that was one play later on in the evening. I thought was a decent look. I didn't take it. 16-17 BYU over Southern Illinois, even just because they're at home, and they jumped right on them 14-0. The offense looked really, really good. The defense is solid, but that's them at home. They're just a little bit different on the road. And SMU, bounced back, of course. Houston Christian 59-7. But I saw that defense, that's supposed to be all right, have some holes there. Week 1, maybe they figure some stuff. This is the classic. We'll get into this kind of all week because it's week 2 here. But man, the overreaction. And we got to check our selves with all some of these games after big wins against shitty schools and some tight games or maybe a loss versus maybe a solid team. So I think there's too many points here. I agree. Let's hit the total. I'd lean over in this game a little bit. I don't know if I'm going to get there. It's right around 55 and a half. I think we could see some.
Yeah, which is
it all the way up to 56?
56. Yeah, I'll probably bet the over a little bit. I definitely feel better about the over than a strong opinion on either side, personally.
Yeah, there's still some 55 and a half, but you're right. If you can get under here, the 56, that is the number. But I think BYU, the whole problem is taking them as a dog on the road. It's just we've done this a long time. It doesn't work out. This is double-digit points, though. And I'm interested on their side. Let's just say I would not lay it with SMU. You know what the issue is, too? I don't trust the 2 QB system. I just don't. I think they're got to go to 1. I've done that for years, but, man, unless it really works, maybe a small program, I don't buy it. I hate the in and out. No one gets in a flow. And I think that could be problems for SMU. Both quarterbacks are talented. I just think they should stick more to 1. And then bring maybe Jennings in for more packages. But he's been getting a little more of the snaps than Stone in these games. We'll see.
It's because he played better than Jones, and better than Stone, I should say, in the first 2 games for extended stretches. Kevin Jennings.
That's a fact. So I just don't love the 2. So I'm leaning BYU here in the 11 points.
I mean, to see the Preston Stone look kind of the way he has in the first 2 games is very underwhelming, very disappointing for someone that was expected to have just this brilliant last year in college as a senior. But boy, it's not been easy sledding. And meanwhile, Jake Retzlaff did look very good. Again, against this FCS opponent, you have to factor that in at home. But Jake Retzlaff for BYU played very well. Over 300 passing yards, was very efficient. Chase Roberts is an outstanding receiver for them. They've got weapons, BYU, so that's why I think we could see some points there. And again, we'll see. SMU probably is going to go to the 2-quarterback system again because I think Rhett Lashley's trying to see one of these guys separate from the other, and nobody has so far. All right, Duke and Northwestern. We've got Northwestern, 3-point home favorites, 37 the total. Look at that total. And this is an effect of where the home games are being played. Close to the lake, close to Lake Michigan there in Illinois. Wind is an issue. And obviously, when we talk about totals and when do you want to bet unders because of weather? When wind is a factor, and that clearly could be the case when you're playing that close to the lake, which is where Northwestern is playing their home games right now. And obviously, we saw signs of that last week in their season opener against Miami of O in that very same stadium against the Redhawks. I mean, it was just almost like a wind vortex, if you will. And obviously struggles to move the football. 19 points in that game. You didn't even have to sweat it. The total was 40. 13-6 Northwestern beating the defending MAC champions, Miami, Ohio, last week. I love the defense. Look, Northwestern played excellent on the defensive side of the ball for the most part. They held Miami O to 40 yards rushing, which is good to see. They did throw the ball a little bit. Brett Gabbert, the secondary was a little weaker, but 2 key interceptions. They did force some interceptions, turnovers of Gabbert, which were the difference. I'm still not a big Mike Wright guy. The Vanderbilt transfer at quarterback. He wasn't great, 18 of 30. You need to be a little more efficient in your completion percentage than that. 178 passing yards. I'm not shocked. I've seen enough Mike Wright going back to Vanderbilt. That's what you're going to get. Ham and egg or quarterback. Not someone that I'm really all that fond of when you look at it. I do like Northwestern, though, and what they've done. Braun's done an outstanding job. They've now covered 8 straight. 8-0 against the number dating back to last year, Northwestern, in their last 8 games. They've been a point spread machine. They've been undervalued. And obviously, you're only laying 3 with them here. But Duke, look, Elon's a solid. I don't want to say they're an elite FCS team. They're a solid FCS team. They're a good FCS team. So, it wasn't a garbage can that they played last week, Duke, in that 26-3 win. It was concerning. It took a while for the offense to get going, but in that second half, it got going. And Malik Murphy, the Texas transfer, really got going in the second half. 291 passing yards, 26 of 40, 2 touchdowns in that game. Couldn't run the football, which is concerning. Only 59 rushing yards, but they did throw the ball pretty well. Northwestern secondary a little weaker. I'm having a tough time with this one. I don't know if I want to fade the Northwestern 8-game point spread covering streak. 8 straight point spread covers, 8-0 against the spread for Northwestern in their last 8 games dating back to last year. I don't think I want to step in front of that, especially after seeing them beat a solid MAC team, the defending champion, Miami, Ohio, from the MAC last week. But Duke will be tougher. I'm concerned about the Northwestern secondary, which is the weaker part of the defense against Malik Murphy, who had showed that he could get the ball downfield a little bit through the air. And I'm just flat out thinking that as far as ceiling CMAC with these 2 quarterbacks, who's got the higher ceiling? I'll take Malik Murphy in a heartbeat over Mike Wright. Mike Wright's never going to get any better. He's been in college for several years. He really hasn't gotten much better. Malik Murphy, okay, didn't work out in Texas, but you take a step down now. You're in the ACC. You're at Duke. A little manageable now as far as the schedule and the quality of opponent you're facing. I just think he's the better QB, and sometimes I have a tough time betting against the better quarterback, the more talented quarterback, when they're getting a field goal. So it's probably a conflict game for me, probably going to be a pass game for me. C-Mac, what do you think here? Duke, Northwestern.
Man, this should be smash mouth. If you got in on this under, if you got like a 39.5, 39, I think it was, and that is low, because I think this game is just a handoff, control, slow game. Northwestern, I think the defense will be very good. 6-2 the last 8 to the under. You mentioned 8-0 against the number, ATS. And I think this game, would be like 16-13 maybe type game here. One thing in this rivalry, I forget these teams play just about every year, but man, Duke's just owned 5 straight wins, 5 straight covers too. Not even just wins, but I don't know what we get here. I like that under 39. It's a little bit low. Even at 37, I'd lean that way. Even a field goal at home, I'm not taking Northwestern. No way. In a dogfight game like this, If we get the hook, I'd be interested in Duke because I think they could keep this close. I think you have a little bit of the better quarterback with Murphy. And you mentioned I'm not a huge Mike Wright. They're just going to run it, play that good defense. But it's been what Braun's done there at Northwestern has been great to end the season. And, already a win, 13-6, an ugly one. And this one could be ugly too. So, yeah, under here. And maybe if I get the hook, as much as Northwestern's just been red hot ATS, maybe 3.5 will have a little value here with Duke.
Oh, coming out of the Pat Fitzgerald mess, that was a shit show he inherited, David.
Yeah.
He's done an outstanding job. Outstanding. And I don't think they're overly talented, but you talk about a coach that gets the absolute most out of what
his players,
got,
yeah.
He does that, and he's done an outstanding job. That being said, how many of these games of Northwestern that like I said, they've covered 8 in a row. How many of them have they been underdogs? Well, they were 3-point favorites last week against Miami.
Last week.
Purdue, they were 2.5-point favorites, and every other game that they covered during this 8-0 ATS run, they were dogs. So that speaks to the point where do we want to lay a field goal? Certainly not more than a field goal with Northwestern. Yeah. So interesting game, though. We're going to find out a lot about these two teams on Friday night. Like I say, I don't want to fade the Northwestern ATS streak. But at the same point in time, I think Duke's got the better quarterback here in this game. And we'll have to see with Manny Diaz, right? It was not good at Miami last time he was head coach, but he's a respected DC. He's now the head coach here at Duke. Let's see what he does. He's obviously got a big shoes to fill when you talk about Mike Elko and the job he did there. All right, let's go to Saturday. Georgia Tech and Syracuse. Nice little ACC matchup here. Georgia Tech, 3-point road favorites at the Carrier Dome or whatever fucking sponsor that it's called now that's bought the place. 59.5, 60. The total here in this game. I'm still calling it Carrier Dome. To hell with it. That's what I'll always think of it as. Look, I laid the points with Syracuse, -16 against Ohio last week. And a disappointing push, looked early in the game like, oh, they got no chance here to cover this number. And then they ended up leading got the lead past 3 touchdowns. And then Ohio gets a touchdown to get it to 16 in the fourth quarter. And then there were no points after that. A lot of good and a lot of bad for Fran Brown and Syracuse in their first game. The good was the offense. Kyle McCord looked good, the Ohio State transfer. Took a little while at the beginning of the game for him to get going. But again, new program, new offense, new surroundings. Maybe it just took him a little bit of time to get going. But once he did, that offense was humming, and they really didn't stop. And he ended up throwing for 354 passing yards, 27 of 39. LaQuint Allen was successful running the ball, 98 rushing yards in that game. A phenomenal game for specifically Trebor Pena and Oronde Gadsden for Syracuse and the receiving corps. They combined for almost 200 receiving yards, 3 receiving touchdowns in the game. But concerns on the defensive side of the football for Syracuse. They gave up 255 rushing yards to Ohio on the ground. Their running back, Anthony Tyus, just did a number on that Syracuse run defense. 203 rushing yards for Tyus in that game against Ohio against Syracuse, rather. So, yeah, concerns, especially when Ohio brought back very little on the offensive line, and they're overpowering you at the line of scrimmage and running the football right down your throat the whole game. You got to believe that's a concern coming out of that victory for Syracuse, especially when you factor Ohio way down as far as returning production this year. Lost everybody, lost a ton from last year, both sides of the ball. And it was more of a struggle, I think, for Syracuse to get through that game than a lot of people thought. So the offense looked good. Defense, not so much. Parker Navarro threw for 181, but it was the run game that really got Syracuse in trouble. And when you factor in this particular matchup against Georgia Tech and what they want to do on offense, it's troubling for Syracuse. We know there's a team that's going to want to run the football. They have a mobile quarterback in Haynes King, where running the ball himself from the quarterback spot is part of the offense here for this team. They've got obviously a phenomenal back in Jamal Haynes. We saw what he did obviously against Florida State in Ireland in the season opener. So talk about a shoddy run defense against a weak Ohio team. And now you got to face a Georgia Tech team that's run heavy. You know, they're probably run first on offense with sprinkling in a little passing from Haynes King. You worry about that Syracuse defense. Certainly I do going into this game. Georgia Tech, credit to them. looked a little sleepy early. Georgia State went down the field. First drive, Christian Veillere just couldn't put the ball in the end zone. Oh, my Canadian quarterback, man. I was cheering for him, but not a great game.
That was a tough loss. That was a late ad for me, too.
Yeah, that was. I mean, certainly, look, I get it from a spot perspective. Georgia Tech was coming off the huge win in Ireland over Florida State, now laying a big number. We know Georgia Tech is bigger favorites. Last year wasn't great. They would play down to competition sometimes. But I'll say this, to survive that potential trap against Georgia State, win 35-12. Defense looked awesome again for most. After that first drive, Georgia State did very little most of that game. I will say this, though. They did run the ball a little bit, and Veillere threw for 210. But again, they bent, but they didn't break the defense.
There you go. That's bang. They couldn't get in the end zone. That was the killer.
Turned them aside over and over. A lot of turnover on downs. But again, this is still a much improved. I can say it now through 2 weeks. Definitely, it's a much improved Georgia Tech defense. The offense is still excellent. Like you talk about balance, 225 on the ground, 274 through the air for Georgia Tech last week in that game against Georgia State. I think the total move up is the right move. I think Georgia Tech with that run-first offense, Syracuse was just absolutely gashed, just absolutely crushed on the ground by Ohio. How are you going to handle Georgia Tech now? You couldn't handle Ohio's ground attack. How are you going to handle Georgia Tech? How are you going to handle Jamal Haynes here in this game? So I think Georgia Tech can move the ball, can score points. Syracuse, though, the better side of the football for them clearly was offense last week. So I think at home with Kyle McCord in the passing game, capable, I think, of making some plays against Georgia Tech as well. So I agree with the move up in the total. It opened 57.5. I'm seeing 60 now across the board. And look, anything 3 or better based on the matchup, it feels like it's a good matchup for Georgia Tech. And I had to downgrade Syracuse a little bit. Like, I thought Syracuse could absolutely romp Ohio. Ohio lost so much last year, and it was much more of a struggle for the Orange against that Ohio team. I still think it's a much more talented Syracuse team. But, boy, going from Ohio to Georgia Tech, it's quite the step up, especially with what we've seen out of Georgia Tech here the first 2 weeks. So I agree with the over move. And at this point, I agree with the Georgia Tech move as well, because I just think at this point in time, they're a little bit better than Syracuse. Again, we only have the one game for Syracuse to look at, and it was against a team that's supposed to fall off big time in the MAC this year, Ohio, and they didn't exactly look dominant. And in particular, they looked pretty rough at times on the defensive side of the football, Syracuse against that Ohio team, especially stopping the run, which they could not do. C-Mac, what do you think here? Georgia Tech, Syracuse.
Yeah, you know what? I went with the Syracuse team total, and I'm just glad that they got there barely. I thought they might just get into the mid-30s or low 40s, which they did.
I expected more from their defense than that, and their defense was disappointing. There's no other way around it. It was a disappointing defensive effort from them.
I mean, all I say is practice this week should be, oh, man, stopping the run, drills, Oklahoma's, everything you can think of for Syracuse this week. But, you take from it, it's just one game. It's just so big, like you mentioned, because this Ohio team lost everything. Everyone thought they'd be just awful, and they gave up 250 yards on the ground. It was ouch. But the offense looked good. McCord looked good. What he threw for like 375, 4 touchdowns. He did have a pick, but he looked pretty good in that one. Yeah, the other side, that was a late ad for me with Georgia State. Just couldn't convert. You mentioned the fumble, right? Or, right down there, that opening drive. And they moved the ball. Georgia Tech, the defense looks good, but, they threw for over 200 something. They ran for, I think, about 125. They just couldn't get it done in the end. And Georgia Tech kind of tacked on that last touchdown and couldn't get anything else from Georgia State there. So that was a tough game because we talked about it last week. I thought it was kind of the perfect letdown. I didn't want to move. I sat with it all week. And it bit me in this one. I just think there's a lot of hype here for Georgia Tech. The win in Ireland, back home at Sleepy Spot, they beat Georgia State. They look great. This is a game where the Haynes King turnover comes in. Raucous crowd on the road. He's looked great, these first 2 games. And if he continues like that, Georgia Tech's going to win 9 games and be very good this year. But now favorite to the 3. If you like them maybe under the 3, I get it. But no way. No way I want Georgia Tech. No way, no how. I'd be on Syracuse or nothing. Them giving up all those yards on the ground scares the shit on me. But that's where I'd be in this football game.
Well, here's the problem, too, and this is the one concern. Even though I think it's a good matchup for Georgia Tech, here's the one concern now. Okay, Georgia State, but Georgia State, they hired their coach late in the spring. It's a totally revamped roster. Take that win with a grain of salt. And now with what you've seen from Florida State in 2 games, just how impressive is what you did in Ireland against them now after the way they looked against Boston College on Monday night, Florida State. So, yes, it's been an impressive 2-0, but I still want to see a little bit more. That's why I say if you like Georgia Tech, I wouldn't lay more than 3. If it were to get higher than that, I'd no longer be interested in Georgia Tech in this game, because I actually bet Georgia Tech a small Monday morning when it was below a field goal. The over is what I like more, though, in this game. All right, Kansas State and Tulane. We got K-State 10-point road favorites, 49 the total in this game. Pretty difficult to gauge, right? Both of these teams. Kansas State played UT Martin. They won 41-6. Beat down a team they should, although they didn't cover that one. And then Southeast Louisiana for Tulane, they shut them out 52-0. I'll say this about Tulane. I'm reluctant to fade them in this price range against even a very good Kansas State team, because I think the world of their head coach, John Sumrall. I think they hit the ball out of the park with the coaching hire. He did a great job at Troy. You don't believe me? Look at that fucking Troy team over the weekend against Nevada. You don't think they missed John Sumrall and his coaching? They looked terrible, awful against Nevada last week. It was a tremendous hire to get him in here. And like I say, this is going to be tough because you're still talking about a new roster, new coaching staff, but it's a damn good coach. And surprisingly for Tulane in that game against Selah, Darian Mensah was the quarterback. He got the start. He beat out Kai Horton, an incumbent quarterback who backed up Michael Pratt here the last couple of years at Tulane. And the Oregon transfer they brought in, Ty Thompson, who a lot of people thought coming into the season was the most talented quarterback currently on the Tulane roster. Well, this Darian Mensah kid beat them both out for the job, and he ended up starting. It's a bit of a surprise that he's the starting quarterback. You'd think he's going to be the guy again here against Kansas State. We'll see how that goes. Of course, Kansas State thinks that they're going to get a big season here from Avery Johnson. He takes over as the quarterback here for Kansas State this year. He's got all the tools, got a good arm, can move a little bit in the pocket. This is a really entertaining, under-the-radar game Saturday. Not as many people are going to be talking about this, but I think we're going to find out just how much of a contender Kansas State is in the Big 12. And I think we're going to find out very quickly in this game, C-Mac, how quickly John Sumrall can keep things afloat here with Tulane. Because Willie Fritz and Tulane, they turned into an AC powerhouse, contender year in and year out. Great G5 program. Is John Sumrall ready to keep it there this year? Because if they give Kansas State a game or pull an upset here, you're going to have to upgrade Tulane a shit ton. Bottom line is, look, I respect Sumrall enough where I'm not laying 10 with K-State here on the road. What do you think here, C-Mac, Kansas State, Tulane?
Yeah, this is one that I need to sit with because especially in week 2s, I just don't know enough with these teams with the quarterbacks they have in there. I mean, I know Avery Johnson is pretty solid. You hit on it, can run, throw, but going on the road and laying 10 all the way around, I think this K-State team is more talented. But laying 10 here, even at Tulane, and it's a big question here with Tulane. I mean, cupcake win, 52-0. The defense, how much you take away from them? A shutout, give up 200 yards. They look great. Mensah looked good. But this will be a big, big step up in this one. I wanted to hit on a few things. Tulane, towards the end of last year, had a bunch of unders, I think. I remember. If it's not the last 6 of 7 went under the total. Can that defense, play up? And one thing, K-State's been great against the number the last year or two, but they have some games on the road where it's like, do you want to lay the 10 points? I really don't. So right now, this game is just a pass for me. These are the ones with, so many college football games that sometimes you don't have a bet on. I just want you go through at the end of the week, go through everything because you're going to use for a course down the line. So big week 2 matchup. I can't wait to see.
Another thing you want to remember too is these scheduling spots too early in the season. And Tulane does have a big one at Oklahoma next week, but Kansas State's got their Big 12 season
Is
opener
that next
against
week?
Arizona next week. Yes, both of them play next week. Arizona next week for Kansas State, at Oklahoma next week for Tulane.
Oklahoma. Okay.
I think for Kansas State, it's more of a tricky spot because for Tulane, this is a big game. Tulane's coming into this game focused. This is Kansas State, Big 12 team coming in. K-State, meanwhile, well, it's Tulane, and yeah, they're kind of rebuilding, new coach, and we got Arizona at home in our first Big 12 game next week. So I think it's more of a dubious spot for K-State personally here in this game. You can tell in my voice, I'm leaning Tulane a little bit, but there is a big, potential big-time edge in the trenches here for Kansas State. That does concern me a little bit. But
Yeah.
You're not going to see me fading John Sumrall as a double-digit dog. This coach was a great hire, and we'll see if his Tulane Green Wave can hold up for 60 minutes here against Kansas State at home. All right, Bowling Green and Penn State. We've got the Nittany Lions, 34.5-point home favorites, 48.5 the total. Big win, of course, last week for the Penn State on the road in Morgantown against West Virginia. Just looked like men against boys the more that game went on. It just the West Virginia offense was shut down. That defense looks outstanding again for Penn State. Defense has really not been their issue. Well, other than playing Michigan and Ohio State. That's when the defense has been the issue. But everybody else, that defense has been an elite unit for this Penn State team the last couple of years. What was different about Penn State, and it wasn't just a little different, it was a lot different. The offense, the creativity, the play calling from Andy Kotelnicki, the first-year offensive coordinator here for Penn State, throwing the ball downfield, pushing the ball vertically downfield in the passing game, something that Penn State faithful have been crying out for the last 2 years. Put the ball in Drew Aller's hands. Let's see what kind of an arm he has. Let's see him try to get the ball deep. And the results were great. And Drew Aller had probably one of the better games I've seen him play at the quarterback spot for Penn State. They were aggressive. They took shots downfield. They were true to their word. And now all of a sudden, for the last couple of years, and I think this year too, you're going to have an excellent Penn State defense. If you couple any kind of capable, explosive offense, and that's what I saw in Penn State, C-Mac, on Saturday. I finally saw explosiveness on offense, especially throwing the football, which they have had zero of the last 2 seasons. That is huge. And you couple now an offense that could be explosive, dynamic, diverse, because you can run it with Allen and Singleton, your 2 great running backs, a good offensive line, and now all of a sudden you found a passing game that can make big plays down the field. To go with that defense, sky could be the limit for Penn State. Again, I still have to see it against the heavyweights of the Big Ten, especially when they play Ohio State later in the season, but they do get Ohio State at home. Let's see it if they can finally slay the dragon there. But I'm telling you what, this offense, I had to definitely give it a upgrade after what I saw last week against West Virginia. It looked way more dynamic than anything I saw from Penn State offensively last year. We know the track record of James Franklin in these big favorite roles. He's just he dominates. He did it again, of course, against West Virginia last week, an easy win and cover when he's a touchdown favorite or more. It's almost at the point where when he's in this kind of point spread range as a big favorite, I just can't touch the opponent, can't bet the opponent because the numbers are just so dominant for James Franklin as a bigger favorite. I think it's something like 25-4 against the spread, something crazy like that.
Yeah.
Just incredible numbers for him as head coach at Penn State when they're a touchdown favorite or more. It's when they're an underdog or in a pick'em and they're against teams that are really good. That's when they struggle. But they have had no issues as bigger favorites. My one concern about laying the points here with Penn State is the spot. You're coming off that kind of huge victory, big game against West Virginia last week. Is the focus there for 60 minutes against Bowling Green when you play? Although actually, the good news for Penn State is there's no look ahead at all. In fact, after this game, they have a bye week, and then they play Kent State at home. So it's probably a good thing for Penn State backers that, they have nothing on the horizon that's going to take their focus probably away from Bowling Green here. But I like Bowling Green a lot this year as a team. I thought they were damn impressive against Fordham. Fordham's a good FCS program. Beat them 41-17. In their first game. We'll see how they fare here in this one, but I was very impressed with what I saw at Bowling Green last Thursday night. I love Bazelak. He's an experienced quarterback. They've got a great offensive line. They've got great weapons. They can run the football. They're very balanced on offense, and I think their defense, finally, it got better last year. Could be even better defense this year. Problem is, you're taking a gigantic step up in class here on the road against Penn State. So it's a stay off from a side perspective for me in this game, but beware. that if James Franklin and Penn State are up 31 fourth quarter and they have a chance to get that touchdown to cover the point spread, they will. He's one of those coaches that will do that, and that's something you want to be aware of. So, and I look at Penn State as an over team a little bit, especially when they're in these mismatch situations. And I like the Bowling Green offense enough where I think they could maybe like score 7 or something like that, maybe like a 42-7 type of deal, because I think Penn State will move the ball well in this game. So I lean over. I'm not touching the side either way. I think Bowling Green's a team I want to back. I just cannot go against this James Franklin Penn State track record when he's a favorite of a touchdown or more. Like the results are just dominant for Penn State in this point spread range. What do you think here, C-Mac? Bowling Green, Penn State.
Yeah, in this game with the total, I mean, Bowling Green's team total is just going to be a touchdown probably here, right? With this number, 7.5. I mean, it's 48.5. So maybe they can, let's go to Bowling Green. I thought the win was all right. I still, though, I don't know to make of their defense a little bit. I mean, like they step up, they have shit. Even to Fordham, they gave up 400 yards of offense. Like they didn't look great. But Bazelak, you mentioned solid, been in college forever. He had 168 last week, just did enough. At Penn State, it was a classic spot. They had those great numbers. People thought West Virginia, and we talked about it. It was a wait for me in that one. And then Penn State just goes out. And the one problem, though, their defense was great, but West Virginia was off. The offense was out of sorts. They moved it a little bit, but they lost. I mean, they had 4 fumbles. They lost a couple of them. I mean, turnovers were just killer in that game. But, yeah, they had that huge second quarter where Penn State scored 20. Singleton had a huge game, 120 yards. I think Penn State wins here pretty big. I always try to look for a big dog like this, but they just keep winning, and this seems like the 49, 10 type game.
No doubt. It's like I say, Penn State's tough team to bet against when they're in this kind of point spread range. These are the games where usually they roll. It's step up in class games they've had the issues with. All right.
Bowling Green's been a better dog too, a little bit. Last year they covered numbers, but yeah, tall task here.
Pittsburgh, Cincinnati, Bearcats 2-point home favorites, 59.5 the total. One of my favorite totals last week, pretty sure I mentioned it on the show as well last week, was Kent State, Pittsburgh. Kent State, a much improved offensive team because they had nobody back on offense last year. This year, they bring back a lot on offense this season. And a new starting quarterback, Devin Cargman, but everyone back on the O-line for the most part. A lot of their skill position talent back. And that offense actually looked good against Pitt's defense at times. But I thought the Pitt offense, how would they transition to this new up-tempo offense under Cade Bell, the son of Kerwin Bell, who's the head coach of Western Carolina and former CFL quarterback. And, boy, they look good, Pittsburgh on offense, with Eli Holstein, the new quarterback for Pitt this year. They look good. They were able to run the football successfully. The passing game looked a little more dynamic. They have explosive plays. We don't think of Pitt offensively as a team that known for a boatload of explosives, but boy, they had a bunch of them in the game against Kent State. 336 through the air for Holstein in that game. They got 145 rushing yards from Desmond Reed, who was outstanding. It was a great balanced attack, 201 on the ground, 369 through the air, playing at a fast pace. So I think definitely when you look at this Pitt offense, obviously it's only one game, and it is Kent State, bottom rung MAC team. But a MAC team that I think is going to be better this year than last year. Still a very impressive performance to put up 55 points. It'll be interesting to see how they fare here against definitely a tougher opponent, Cincinnati, even though I've got my concerns about Cincinnati. 38-20 against Towson. I took Towson plus the points. I'm not really all that high on Cincinnati this year. I don't love what Satterfield. Satterfield didn't impress me at Louisville. And to me, it was a downgrade going from Fickell to Satterfield as head coach when Fickell left Cincinnati for Wisconsin. So to me, I look at this as I don't love Satterfield's coaching at the moment. Sorsby was good, but let's see what Brendan Sorsby, the Indiana transfer, does here in this game. They did run the football. What's concerning to me, Towson runs for almost 200 yards. Towson, almost 200 yards rushing against Cincinnati's defense, 244 through the air. So not what you want to see. I'll be honest. I think the wrong team's favored here. The only thing that's concerning to me is it's Pitt on the road. And Pitt on the road has had some tough times with Narduzzi. But, boy, I'm telling you what, when I look at these two teams and I look at where these two programs are at, I think Pittsburgh's the better of these teams right now. So at +2, it's Pittsburgh for me. But I like the over even more. I think that I'm going to go right back to the well over this total. Pitt playing fast. I think Cincinnati looked a little bit better on offense than they did on defense last week against Towson, and that doesn't bode well. The way that defense played against Towson doesn't bode well for now what looks like a very explosive, up-tempo, balanced attack that Pittsburgh has at their disposal this season. C-Mac, what do you think here? Pitt, Cincy.
Oh, this is just an ugly game. And two teams, you thought the last 10, 50 years defense, not here. And it's showing like you're talking about. Totals 60.
79 points in that Pitt game, and the total was 54.
Yeah, and Pitt easily, Kent State, we know how bad they are defensively, 55. But, if Kent State how bad they are, at least they moved it, Pitt's defense held them in check, but they scored 24 points. So, they were able to move the ball a little bit, even though it was a blowout. And same thing with Towson, like you hit on. They threw for 244, ran for almost 200, 194. It's just that they got gashed. Cincinnati was very good on offense. They ran for 275. I think Sorsby should be solid in this matchup. And when you get to it, I get why you like this over. I mean, they've gone over dating back to last year, how bad these teams were starting to play to the over.
And Pittsburgh wasn't playing tempo last year like this year either.
No, and they still, just how bad their defense was, and they were able to score. And Cincy has started too. 5 of the last 7 have gone over. And I think this one could. The line's pretty, I think, sharp here at 60. But I think we get here in this game. Tough on the sides. I just don't know enough of these two teams. Just seeing Pitt a little bit, Cincy in this week too. And it's going to be tough because every year we go through this, but this is how each week goes by, man. Like all these teams, we go off last year, the transfers, everything, week 1, then the overreaction. So games like this sometimes are, if they're not really locked in on a team that I love. I think Cincy here could win at home, but I don't even want to lay the 2 with them. I'm sure you just go money line, but I don't even want that.
So Cincinnati played a middling FCS team. Pittsburgh played a lower tier FBS team last week in Kent State. So which team played the tougher opponent? I'll say this. Pitt offensively looked impressive. There's not really much that impressed me about Cincy against Towson. The offense, they looked all right at times, decent. But that defense
they ran it well.
Towson, that defense against Towson was not that good for Cincinnati. And that's what concerns me. Like I said, I think Pitt can win this game. I like Pitt. I like the over even more, though. All right. Now it's time for a big one. One of the bigger ones on Saturday. Big noon kickoff on Fox. Gus Johnson, Joel Klatt. Texas, Michigan in the big house. The Longhorns. How about 7 now? Texas as a road favorite at the big house. Total 43.5. I thought I saw this total like before the Saturday games opened. I think this Texas-Michigan total was somewhere around 48.5. Look at the tumble that this total has taken. And if you watch Michigan's offense last week at home against Fresno State, you understand why. Wow. Not great in his debut was Davis Warren at the quarterbacks. But that whole offense, just nothing really clicked. The run game was kind of disappointing what we got from them. They've got huge concerns at receiver. Lost a lot of talent, production from last year at wide receiver. A lot of concerns about that Michigan offense coming out of that Fresno State win. And you're going to look at it and you see, 30-10 Michigan. Boy, that offense looked great. No, they did not. 118 passing yards, 15 of 25 for Davis Warren. Like I said, it was a start and stop kind of performance from the ground game for Michigan. Not great by any stretch of the imagination. Now, their run defense was phenomenal. Absolutely tremendous in that football game. Look, the D-line's phenomenal for Michigan. Not surprising Fresno couldn't run the football a lick. They did give up some yards through the air, though, in the secondary. Mikey Keene did throw for 235 passing yards against Michigan's secondary. Yeah. Is that an area that Quinn Ewers can take advantage of here for Texas? Because I think they'll definitely have more success probably throwing the ball than potentially running it. And another thing, too, for Michigan, like I said, with the concerns about this receiving core, I mean, my goodness, Tyler Morris, 15 yards. Kendrick Bell, 11 yards. What would, and we said this, and I said this on many shows that I've done here leading up to the season about Michigan. I said this. Colston Loveland is probably going to be their leading receiver this year out of the tight end spot. He's phenomenal. He's one of the best tight ends in college football in the country. But what they've got or what they don't have from the looks of things right now at wide receiver is concerning right now for me. Like at some point, people are going to say, we got to do what we can to take away Loveland at tight end over the middle of the field, and we got to dare the outside receivers to make a play. And that's what it could end up being here for Michigan moving forward. That teams are going to see them and say, hey, these fucking receivers don't scare us one bit. Take Loveland away and let's see what Warren or Orgy or anyone can do as far as throwing the ball to the outside to the perimeter. That's something to maybe look at moving forward. As for Texas, maybe Colorado State's going to suck again. I'm not sure what it is. If it was Texas being awesome or Colorado State, we're waiting for them to make an improvement and improve and turn the corner. And boy, that was ugly for Colorado State. I mean, that's a quarterback that's got a decent arm, that's got an ability to throw the football, and he could not do anything against that Texas secondary. 74 passing yards for Colorado State, only 59 from Braden Fowler-Nicolosi in a game that they were down start to finish and down big, where you need to throw the football when you're down by that many points. And they fucking still, as a team, only had 74 passing yards in that game against Texas, in that 52-0 shellacking that Colorado State took at the hands of Texas. I'll say this, as far as top to bottom, the run game was solid with Jarrett Gibson and Jaden Blue. This receiving core, with Isaiah Bond, the Alabama transfer, was a great get. Matthew Golden, Ryan Wingo. There's weapons to work with for Quinn Ewers. A very efficient day for him, 20 of 27, 260 passing yards. It was such an easy, dominant win. They even got Arch Manning in there for a drive, and he led a touchdown drive for Texas. So, look, Michigan, even though they won 30-10, keep in mind one of those scores was a pick six right at the end of the game. It was 23-10
right at the end.
Michigan, and Fresno's about to go in and make that a one-possession game with under 5 minutes to go in the fourth quarter, and then it's turned into a pick six the other way. That's one of the more misleading scores you'll see. That was not impressive one bit from Michigan, and easy wire-to-wire point spread cover for Fresno for me, and I think Connor Mack kind of liked them as well. Fresno plus the points there against Michigan, and the under was definitely a good. And I'm not an under guy, and even I love that under with Fresno and Michigan last week. I understand why the under's taking money, because I do think Texas won't go up and down the field. I respect Michigan's defense enough to think Texas is not going to go up and down the field at will on the road against them. But I don't know how this Michigan offense, C-Mac's going to move the ball consistently against what looked like a pretty damn dominant Texas defense, and a defense that looks like they've gotten even a step better and even more improvement based from last year for this Texas defense. And I think Michigan's offensive line and offense just in general might struggle to block and pass protect. Because if you're having trouble at the line of scrimmage on offense against Fresno, how are you going to handle Texas? That's the big question. Problem is it's 7 now. I think if you got a good number with Texas, I definitely think Texas is the better team. They're going to win this game. But boy, 7's getting up there against a still capable enough Michigan defense. So I wouldn't play it at the current number. And like I said, I did like under 2, but man, that ship has sailed. You're getting the worst of it now at 43.5. But hell of a game on Saturday. Looking forward to it. C-Mac, what do you think? Texas, Michigan. I am concerned, C-Mac, about that Michigan offense, especially here against Texas after what I saw against Fresno.
Yeah, I think even with this number, 43.5, even look under. I talked about it. Michigan was going to struggle, that offense. They don't have the players, and I just didn't like the play calling, like I talked about too. It's going to be very conservative until they can maybe get in the flow and get going. Warren was just, he's 15 of 25. They didn't really, they're not even taking any shots too. I know they want to run it, but I don't know. I think it was conservative. They got to do something to, open it up here versus Texas, but I don't know if that happens. But they're going to have to lean on the defense, which was good. Yeah, but I thought Mikey Keaton, made some all right plays there. They couldn't really run it, but he threw for 235. They had that TD late, And then, yeah, that was a big misleader too, that pick six late. I mean, not only that, Michigan just scores to make it 23, and then that to make it 30-10, because it was a lot closer. I think it was 16-10 for most of that into that fourth quarter. So it was definitely a lot closer. Texas was huge. And I'm glad I stayed off, because we talked earlier last week. But man, I thought of taking the points to Colorado State. Glad I didn't. Man, Texas just came out and stomped that ass 31-0 at half. And it was just awful. Yeah, and they couldn't throw it after that. Colorado State. Shit just rolls down. Quentin Ewers was good. You mentioned Golden, Gibson. All these guys had huge games. It won't be easy to go into the big house and just sling it around. So, yeah, I don't have enough confidence in Michigan, their offense, just because it's so early in the year. But Michigan plus the 7 and the under is the only way I think you can look here. If you really love Texas, see if you get under the touchdown. But yeah, big game here early on, week 2. A lot of people are high on Texas too. But man, this is maybe their year. We will see.
I wasn't totally sold on that, but I've got to admit that Colorado State game, Colorado State, I expected more from going into that game than they showed. I've got to give Texas credit.
One game though.
That was an ass.
One game.
Yes,
it was. You can't reach
home
too
against
far.
Colorado State, road against Michigan. Michigan's got offensive issues, but that's still a solid, definitely a better than average defense still, especially in the defensive line. And so you still got to be, you got to be alert here if you're Texas and ready to play a good football game, because the offense is a concern for Michigan, but they can still get after it defense. And if you're turning the ball over and you're struggling to move the ball against them, you could still find yourself in a barn burner here if you're the Texas Longhorns. But I don't think it's a stretch to say offensively, Texas definitely looks like the better team here in this matchup so far. All right, Arkansas and Oklahoma State. We've got the Oklahoma State Cowboys 7.5-point home favorites, 62.5 the total in this game. Lots of money this week early on Arkansas, because this opened 9.5. It's down to 7.5 now. So a lot of people liking Arkansas, and Arkansas looked awesome. Taylon Green looked awesome in his debut with the Razorbacks. The Boise transfer at quarterback looked good. Even throwing the ball, he looked more effective than he did at Boise. And we know what he can do athletically. They've got some weapons to work with. Bobby Petrino back in the fold as the OC for Sam Pittman here at Arkansas, and he looked like he didn't skip a beat calling plays. And that's the one thing about Bobby Petrino. Say what you want about the stuff off the field and the shit that went down when he was the Arkansas head coach before a long time ago. He's always been a pretty capable offensive play caller, and he kind of showed that last week. But I do want to caution people. Arkansas Pine Bluff is not a good FCS football team. Not at all. So while that looked absolutely impressive, and I thank Arkansas for cashing the over for me in that game all by themselves, scoring the points needed to put that game over the total. Be careful. Pine Bluff's not a very good FCS team. Oklahoma State played an FCS team as well, but here's the difference. South Dakota State, arguably the best team in FCS football. Certainly one of them. No question about that. Oklahoma State got tested over the weekend in Stillwater by South Dakota State, and they won that game pretty convincingly, pretty handily. I definitely have to give Oklahoma State a little bit of a upgrade in power ratings after a performance like that against arguably the best FCS team going right now, South Dakota State, 44-20. I like that Alan Bowman didn't make many mistakes, and that's all he's got to do. You're a veteran quarterback. You've been around forever. Too many times last year, too many bad decisions out of Alan Bowman. Just be good with the football, secure it, ball security, don't turn it over. Let Ollie Gordon, this incredible running back and run game that you have, do the rest, because he's outstanding. And a much improved Oklahoma State defense. Let them do the rest as well. They brought back most of over 90% of their returning production from last year back on this Oklahoma State team. There's a lot of people liking Arkansas here, but I'm not one of them. I haven't bet Oklahoma State. I don't know if I'll bet Oklahoma State here, and we always talk about them. Oklahoma State is a favorite. Oklahoma State is a favorite. That's not the time you want to bet on them with Mike Gundy, but boy, they were impressive, and they did cover easily as a favorite last week against South Dakota State. I wouldn't be joining the steam on Arkansas. Let's put it that way. I got to see more than just playing Pine Bluff at home, one of the worst teams in FCS, before I'm convinced. I really like Oklahoma State. I was high on Oklahoma State coming into the year. I would not fade them now, only laying 7.5. is another game I think we could see some points. I agree with the move up in the total. I still have worries about that Arkansas defense, worries about them against the run, which may not be what you want to have when you're facing, I think, one of the better running backs in the country in Ollie Gordon here for Oklahoma State. C-Mac, what do you think here? Razorbacks, Cowboys.
Yeah, this is a game I when I went through it, I just didn't jump and want to bet anything here. I think the total is pretty sharp if you look at both those scores. And what do we get? A little bit more defense. Oklahoma State with the great first win, week 1. If Ollie Gordon could just pound it. And Arkansas was pretty good. Their defense, 80th overall. They had their hit and miss. They played a little bit better in stretches last year. Gave up 28 points, but they gave over 100, almost 160 on the ground, 154. So if they can't stop Gordon, he should just run wild in this one. And this is just a huge step up. Now on the road, Arkansas Pine Bluff 70-0, 10 possessions, 10 touchdowns. I think they had just easy. And I'm not a huge Taylor Green. He's pretty dynamic. He had his ups and downs. Can he, big road game here for him? I don't know. Maybe they could hang around in this game. And you mentioned it. Oklahoma State got it done last week. That was another game I didn't look at it too much. I didn't want to take Oklahoma State, but they got the cover. Big win. It was at 44-20. And I don't want to lay it here with them because I think this could be close in the end. And I think the total is pretty sharp. I think we get points, but does this get over? Does this get into a shootout? Or, these defenses play a little bit better? Still big question marks for me. The week 2 ism. I'm going to keep going after. Need to see more.
Need to see more. Like I say, I'm impressed enough with Oklahoma State last week against a much better opponent than what Arkansas faced. I ain't going against them laying 7.5 there. Cal and Auburn. We've got Auburn 13-point home favorites, 53.5 being the total here in this one. What happened to Cal last week? I think their game against UC Davis last week, FCS opponent, I wasn't that impressed from what I saw from Cal. So it's going to be interesting to see how they respond here in this game because 31-13, it was a struggle to pull away. Eventually they did. I like what I saw at times last year from Mendoza, the freshman quarterback, but I think consistency is going to be important for him to show it more. I mean, Auburn looked damn impressive, but you are facing a bottom feeder in the FCS, Alabama A&M 73-3. Obviously, it was a great day for Peyton Thorne, great day for Auburn. They rolled up over 600 yards of offense. The Alabama A&M, everything they did, whatever they did on offense, which wasn't much, was through the air. So it was impressive for Auburn, but I'm not really going doing cartwheels that you won set by 70 over one of the worst FCS teams going. So I'm going to need to see more from Auburn, certainly a little bit more before I'm ready to lay 13 with them. But, man, I ain't running to bet Cal. And remember, these two teams played each other last year in Berkeley. Auburn won that game 14-10 on the road. It was a tough travel spot early in the season. Now Cal's got to make the return trip here. Now it's their turn for a tough travel spot all the way down to Auburn, Alabama for this game. Not the easiest road trip by any stretch of the imagination for a West Coast team traveling east for a game that's starting at 12:30 p.m. Pacific, a little early on the body clock for the Cal kids. So if you ask me, I would lean to Auburn, but no, I need to see more. 73-7 against Alabama A&M. That doesn't move the needle for me. What do you think here, Connor Mack? Cal, Auburn.
Yeah, Alabama, A&M. You just have to put it like that. Peyton Thorne, of course, looked amazing in that one, and he will in smaller schools. You'll see that from him. I got to see it more in the big games because he has struggled. So maybe he can step up. This should be a pretty good one. Yeah, you mentioned that game last year. I just got the count 14-10. Or it was lower scoring. And this is a classic one. That was week 2, I believe, Havana, right? Maybe it was week 3, but I think it was week 2.
It was week 2. Yep.
Yeah, they had a high total in that one after it. And I thought Cal that was a go through the motions type game. Like they forced a few turnovers. It was just, I don't know. They
tried to go up tempo last year on offense, and some drives they go fast, some drives they slow it down. I don't even think they know what they want to do on offense right now.
Yeah, and then there's talk. Yeah, if it's full time with Mendoza, I think so. But I don't know. There's talk of Rogers, but they still
I will
have
say this:
odd.
Wilcox is a double-digit dog in the past has been a decent bet, but I don't know
Yeah,
about that.
that's where I'd be. I'm not like going crazy. This is for me, we bet numbers here that over the 2 touchdowns, I'd like a lot better. This 14.5, of course, it's not, but I'm definitely interested a little bit in Cal. You mentioned tough travel, but I think they could hang close to this one. Or is Auburn, big home spot, can they come up big and win big? I don't know. I don't want them laying points like that. Maybe against an Alabama A&M and they win 75-0, but not here. Cal or nothing.
All right, we move along. Baylor and Utah. Here we go. A little Big 12 action here. Utah 14-point home favorites, 53.5 being the total here in this game. The money's come in on Baylor. How about that? You want a little interesting development? This actually opened Utah 17-point favorites at home, and Baylor's taken some of the early money. Cam Rising, his first action in a very long time at quarterback for Utah against Southern Utah, and he looked solid. And you see just the difference he makes. They got zip at the quarterback spot last year. The production was putrid once he got hurt for Utah, and then you get him back, and all of a sudden that offense looks great again. So 49-0, they shut down Southern Utah. We know they're going to be good in the trenches because Kyle Whittingham teams are always outstanding in the trenches, without a doubt. You should see that again here in this matchup. Meanwhile, you look at Baylor, 45-3 against Tarleton State. I don't want to go too, again, berserk over how good they were in that game. They were impressive, and DeQuan Finn, the Toledo transfer, we were going to see, could he fit this offense well? Solid debut. 2 interceptions, though, I will say that. And that's sometimes the issue with DeQuan Finn, is those turnovers and those bad decisions sometimes throwing the football. But, they had a pretty solid game on the ground, 164 rushing yards through the air, 278 passing. Again, though, Tarleton State at home, and now you got to play Utah on the road, one of the strongest home field advantages in all of college football. Now, last year, these teams played at Baylor. Bit of a tricky spot it was for Utah. But Utah went there, got the job done, and won 20-13 on the road. But again, you're talking about Bryson Barnes and Nate Johnson were the quarterbacks that day for Utah, and neither of those guys is even anywhere close to what Utah has with a healthy Cameron Rising back at the controls. So bottom line is, look, I'm not ready yet with Baylor. Okay, Tarleton State doesn't do it for me. That does not. You are going on the road now against a team that could win the Big 12 and a team that is one of the best home field advantages in all of college football. If this thing drops further and it gets below 2 touchdowns, I'm laying it with Utah. I'll just say that right now. C-Mac, what do you think?
Took the words right out of if this goes below, I get the initial look if you want Baylor a little bit. And these are big step-ups for Finn. He's playing some of these bigger teams now this year. We'll see how it goes. You mentioned just last week against the lower Tarleton, he threw a few picks. We know how dual threat, the guy is definitely solid. That game, it was that tricky spot last year, and Utah couldn't move the ball, and Baylor covered in that 2013 game. I think that was the spread 7.5 in that or something like that.
I think it was close to that. Yeah, it was.
And they just covered.
7, right on the number. 7.
Okay.
Yep, good call.
Right on the number. Something we talk about it. Usually I don't late, but at Salt Lake, at home, this is where I want Utah. It's just week 2 here. What do we get? Cam Rice looked really good. Southern Utah beat up little brother from down the road. But under 2 touchdowns, I don't want to lay too much, but at home, they're a team that's come through consistently. It's just so early in the year. So it's going to be a look for me too. Maybe if this continues to drop in this one.
Yeah, I worry because Utah has always had a ball hawking secondary too. How many times have they picked off quarterbacks? And they've made the likes of Bo Nix and some other really good quarterbacks in that building look bad and force interceptions. DeQuan
it is a hostile place to play for sure.
Still interception prone. I don't think he's the most accurate quarterback. Great athlete. He can make the shorter throws, but I still think accuracy wanes from time to time with Taquan Finn throwing the football, and that's something that would concern me here on the road for Baylor going into this game. And by the way, too, I want to point. I got to go back and look at some of these results for Baylor against some of the. Just last year, look at some of these games here at the end of the year. They lost by 34 at Kansas State. There's a comparable. They lost by 25 at TCU on the road down the stretch last year, Baylor. So there's two comparables right there, TCU and Kansas State, where they got their doors blown off on the road. Yeah, I don't agree with this move, and looks like Connor Mack is in the
Let's
same
see if
boat.
this defense is any better.
Yep.
For Baylor.
That's right. We'll have to wait and see. Yeah, Aranda has not exactly gotten this defense playing at the level we expected, considering defense is his background as a coach. All right, to the SEC we go. This is one of your ABC spotlight games in the SEC on Saturday. South Carolina and Kentucky. Kentucky, 10-point home favorites. Total 42.5. I laid it with Kentucky. Got -9. It's up to -10. I was not impressed with South Carolina, not one bit. Not one bit. All this talk, Lenora Sellers, what he's doing in camp, and he's looking like he might be the next great quarterback here, South Carolina. He was horseshit. Let's be honest, for most of that game against Old Dominion. That was not pretty. That did not live up to any camp reports that I saw coming out of South Kakalaki about Lenora Sellers at the quarterback spot. I'm concerned. I'm especially concerned because that's at home against Old Dominion. You're having a tough time like that. I mean, you look at the numbers, 10 of 23, way below 50% completions, only 114 passing yards. You could really struggle at times to run the ball with any sort of consistency as well. It took you 56 fucking rushes to get 174 rushing yards against Old Dominion at home. That's concerning, big time. And fewer sub 50% completion rate at home against Old Dominion's defense. And now you got to go on the road with Lenora Sellers against an excellent, at least a very, very good Kentucky defense. I worry about the ability to move the football here for South Carolina in this game. I did not like what I saw on the offensive side of the football. Not even maybe did I like it for them against Old Dominion last week at home. Meanwhile, a game that was shortened due to it was a crazy night in Lexington for that Southern Miss Kentucky game. It was delayed 2 hours. They finally got it going like at 10:30 Eastern. They get into the third quarter, and then another lightning thunderstorm arrives, another lightning delay, and then they figured, to hell with it. They're already up big, 31-0 third quarter. They said, that's it. We'll just suspend the rest of the game, which is a tough beat if you had the Kentucky Wildcats like I did laying the points, because you get a push, unfortunately, because the game's got to complete, 55 minutes or whatever it is. That's the rule. But Kentucky was pretty dominant in that game. Defense really completely shut down Southern Miss. I liked what I saw out of the new Georgia transfer at quarterback. You talk about South Carolina's quarterback not impressing. I thought Brock Vandegrift, the Georgia transfer for Kentucky, was solid at quarterback. 12 of 18, 169, 3 touchdowns. The run game was solid. Defense was just absolutely outstanding. Only 5 rushing yards allowed to Southern Miss in over into the third quarter. So very impressive. Like I said, I just think after what I saw from South Carolina last week in a negative and what I saw from Kentucky in a positive, I thought actually the number was a little short when it opened. So I understand why the number's up to 10 now. Favorite or nothing for me. C-Mac, what do you think? South Carolina, Kentucky.
Yeah, Kentucky looked really good. Defense looked good. Southern Miss couldn't do anything, as you mentioned. I mean, you couldn't run the ball at all in that one. They didn't throw it either. Roadmaker, 126, 2 picks. And the offense still just kind of did their job, not crazy blowout. Vandegrift looked all right, though. He did have a pick, but he threw for 170 and 3 touchdowns. They ran the ball decent. I like him at home, but I'm not going to lay 10 with them. I think they could win this football game. The defense looks really good. We have a low total here, and I think it's pretty sharp. And because I initially leaned to this under, but I don't know. I gotta watch myself on some of these totals in this one. This one might get too low, but they just haven't moved the ball. That's why I loved Old Dominion so much. I didn't buy it at all. Sellers looked awful. He's lucky that Wilson made a few mistakes for Old Dominion. They should have won that football game, man. I mean, that was the whole way. And they're another team that couldn't get in the end zone for me, settling for field goals. They moved it well and just couldn't do it. He threw two picks there, and one at the end of the game. They had a few fumbles too for Old Dominion. So, yeah, tough down the stretch. And in the fourth, back-to-back field goals where if they had a touchdown, I think they could have won that game. So I can't take South Carolina as a dog. So in the end, get me off of this. I don't know why I'm talking anymore. Get me out of here.
Well, we'll get you out of here. Get me out. We're going to get Connor back out, and we're going to get him.
Get me out of this game.
South Bend, Indiana for Northern Illinois and Notre Dame. Fighting Irish, 28.5-point home favorites, 45.5 the total in this game. I mean, historically, this is not the spot you want to be taking Notre Dame. I mean, they have not been a good bigger favorite. They've gone through – how many times have we done this show for years and talked about Notre Dame when they're 3-4 touchdown favorites at home against lesser competition? It's not the time you want to jump in. Last week might have been a good time to jump in. 3-point dogs at Texas A&M. And yes, that defense was phenomenal. I think Notre Dame, after what we saw against Texas A&M last week, it's fair to say that it could be a top 5 defense in all of college football this year. They were that good. Secondary was locked down. Defensive line got a push. A&M couldn't run the football. Connor Wegman had not a lot of time to throw the ball. That is a damn good Notre Dame defense. The offense, look, a little pedestrian, but A&M's got a pretty damn good defense themselves. So I don't think that I'm panicking about Notre Dame's offense struggling too. But the bottom line is, in the fourth quarter, winning time, game on the line, Notre Dame's offense was moving the ball and putting the ball in the end zone, not A&M. So when it was crunch time, Riley Leonard and that Notre Dame offense delivered when they had to. But again, this is not the spot with that I'm looking to lay more than 4 touchdowns. I'll say this, Northern Illinois, they were very impressive last week, albeit, the opposition was nothing to write home about. But their offense looks like it's going to be capable potentially this season. I mean, they easily covered the number against Western Illinois. And Western Illinois is not a great FCS team, but they're not terrible either. And Northern Illinois did everything they wanted on offense against them with Ethan Hampton. He only had 2 incomplete passes on 20 attempts. 5 touchdowns, 328 through the air. The passing game was very, very impressive from him in that game. I mean, I think in this game, if I were to look at, I don't know if I will. That Notre Dame defense was phenomenal, but spot-wise, it's telling you NIU or nothing. Maybe a little sprinkle for me. First half, full game split, just in case we get one of these deals where Notre Dame's asleep because that's a huge game. That was a physical game. It was a war in the trenches with A&M and Notre Dame last week. You just wonder if, especially in that first half, Notre Dame's just a little bit sluggish. And maybe Northern Illinois first half might be the better option as opposed to trusting them for the full game. But certainly from a spot perspective, can understand why Northern Illinois is taking a little bit of the money here early in the week, 30.5 down to 28.5. C-Mac, what do you think?
Yeah, if I'm running this, maybe early too, it'd be Northern Illinois. One thing is, this defense is one of the better ones. Like, I don't know how they score, maybe a few touchdowns, unless this gets out of hand, the second stringers. But I've just consistently, over the years, when Notre Dame's laying this number, I'm just not touching it. There's just no way, no how. And I'd kind of rather be on the other side. Hampton played well. They beat on, what was it, Western Illinois, right?
Yep. Western Illinois.
Yeah. Yep. So it's, again, week 1, big win. Now you go to Notre Dame. It won't be easy. But if you think of Notre Dame, that was just a massive game, massive win, prime time, week 1, and you come back home. But home opener should be huge too. You know what I mean? Even if you're playing Northern Illinois, it's just nothing for me here. I don't think I'm even going to get involved with taking Northern Illinois either.
Just want to interrupt things for a second, just to say shout out everyone in our YouTube chat right now. Al, Myron Kid, Chosen One, Nasty Nate, good to see Nasty, Joseph Thompson as well, some of our favorites. Ixnizzle, good to see you, my friend. Gold Jew, Kong's Clips, great week in college football for Kong's Clips too. Tremendous record, way to go. Bama Boy, Sweet Lou. We appreciate everybody joining us. Hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and make sure you tell everyone we are still here, Connor Mack and I, every week during the college football season. with hitting the books. And the great thing, too, about our own channel now, CMAC, is when we flip to basketball season, we're still going to be here. We'll deliver college hoops for you as well. So we got it.
Yeah.
Hitting the books, football and basketball, college style.
Yeah, and hopefully everything goes smooth. That we're verified. The clips will be out soon, fast this week, and then going forward. So everything will go good there.
No doubt. All right, Cy-Hawk rivalry next up. Iowa State, Iowa. We've got the Hawkeyes 2.5-point home favorites, 35 the total. I loved hearing Brad Nessler and Gary Danielson at the end of that Ohio State game on CBS last week, knowing that they're calling this game this Saturday, Iowa State, Iowa, trying to like put lipstick on a pig. Yeah, don't act like you'd rather be at here than Alabama and Auburn or some SEC game that you've done for years. So don't act like you're that excited about Iowa State and Iowa. You miss being part of that SEC package, CBS, Nessler and Gary Danielson. You're not fooling me. You can't tell me you'd rather have this game to call on a Saturday afternoon than say Alabama versus Ole Miss or something. So they're not fooling me. But it, actually, in all seriousness, though, it is an interesting game. I mean, the Iowa offense, like last year, it's interesting. I don't know if it's going to be a great game or a fun game or an exciting game, but it's going to be an interesting game because it was a tale of two halves for Iowa. First half last week against Illinois State, they looked like last year's Iowa offense. They couldn't move the football. Like, holy fuck, this is pathetic. Iowa's offense at home against Illinois State, who's not the greatest FCS team, couldn't move the ball. Then all of a sudden they exploded in the second half. Whoa. And they just blew the doors off Illinois State, and they ended up getting 40 points. And go back and look at the past results for Iowa going back years. They haven't scored 40 points very often the last several years. So that was a kind of a high watermark for them. And Cade McNamara and the offense did end up getting it going in the second half of that game. But now you're not playing Illinois State. You're playing against a much more able opponent. Much more challenging opponent in Iowa State, who does bring back, I think, this year, a pretty good defense to the table. The question for Iowa State is how much improvement can they make at the offensive side with Rocco Becht at the quarterback spot? To be honest, I'd still rather have Rocco Becht than McNamara. I've got to see more. I mean, one half against Illinois State, I'm not really ready to say that the Iowa offense is fixed and back and improved yet. Let's see how they do here against a much tougher opponent. Iowa State here in this game. This is a game, but I respect the hell out of Iowa's defense, CMAC. I still do. That defense is good enough to win games all by themselves without question, and we saw that happen a lot last year. Any wins Iowa got, the defense carried them, and they've still got a phenomenal defense this year. And with this point spread range being less than a field goal, it would be one of these deals where if it gets to 3, and certainly if it gets to 3.5, then I get a little interested in Iowa State. But less than a field goal, that defense is good enough to maybe win this game by themselves, regardless of what McNamara and that oftentimes challenged offense does for the Hawkeyes. So I'm not involved in the game at the moment. Certainly the under makes sense, but my gosh, 35. You're not exactly getting a ton of wiggle room there, but yeah, I'm not betting any Iowa overs anytime soon. CMAC, what do you think?
This is short. You don't want to watch this. Get 35.5 and take the under. Like if they score points, I'll gladly take, because I've consistently done this. And usually we get early in the year. The books are finally doing it. But man, we're like, damn, we got to do this, because usually, they'd be like 39 or stuff. But this is too high. Like if they played later in the year, maybe I think this would be lower. I don't know if these teams score much at all. 2 cupcake wins. Defense looked good. Offense just did what they had to do. So defense, running. Maybe a turnover or 2. This game's under.
All right, there we go. Good stuff. All right, Michigan State and Maryland as we go to the Big Ten now for this one. Of course, that was Big 12 versus Big 10 non-conference. This is a conference matchup here. Michigan State and Maryland. Maryland 8.5-point home favorites, 43.5, 44 the total. There is not a single greater wrong side that I had all weekend in college football than UConn. I did not see that coming from Maryland, that Maryland was just going to completely and utterly destroy the UConn Huskies the way they did. I did not expect their offense to do that, quite honestly, because this was an offense where you lose little Tua, Talia Tagovailoa, who I just watched in person get his first CFL touchdown for my Ticats yesterday on Labor Day. They lose him. They lose a good chunk of the production on offense. The O-line is one starter back. And here's Maryland essentially all fucking game up and down the field, scoring at will against that just beleaguered UConn defense. I got to give Mike Loxley a lot of credit. Look, I did not see 50-7 coming. They were only 18.5-point favorites when the number closed in that game, and they just did a number on that UConn defense. And look, this was one of those deals too where we were being led to believe that MJ Morris was going to be the starting quarterback. That was not the case, and Billy Edwards is kind of the guy I would rather have seen be starting quarterback for Maryland. And sure enough, he was the starter, even though it kind of looked like they were going to go to Morris. And it looked like the right decision. I mean, he was 20 for 27. He looked like his accuracy throwing the ball was a lot better. Now, there were a lot of busts in the secondary. There were wide open receivers. The defense was just pathetic for UConn. So let's see when they play some better defenses and better secondary play if Billy Edwards can do that. But certainly it was a great performance from him. Roman Hemby led them with 66 rushing yards on the ground. Nolan Ray chipped in. They had 248 on the ground against UConn, 381 through the air, over 600 yards of offense. Had to upgrade Maryland for a team that I was really worried about, especially on offense coming into the season. We'll see how they fare here because, look, they look much better than I thought. Michigan State on offense, at least, they looked much worse than I thought against Florida Atlantic. Should have known right away when we heard Aiden Childs, the quarterback from Michigan State, say bet the over. We should have hammered the under, at that point. And, of course, it stayed way under the total. 16-10, Michigan State escapes with a victory against Florida Atlantic, mostly because of their defense, which did play well. But, again, I'm not a big Cam Fancher guy, the quarterback for FAU, but the defense was solid for Michigan State. I can't say that about the offense. Aiden Childs, man, you got some work to do, pal. Before anyone's running to bet your games over the total. Let me tell you that. 10 of 24, throwing the ball, 114 through the air, 2 interceptions. Ugly stat line for Aiden Childs in his Michigan State debut. That defense is going to have to show up here on the road against Maryland because the Maryland offense looked way better than I thought. And if Michigan State falls behind by double digits on the road, do they have the offense to come back and go through the back door? After what I saw last week against Florida Atlantic, my answer would be fuck no. They don't have the offense. It was an abysmal offensive performance for Sparty at home against FAU last week. So I actually think Maryland's the side I'd lean with. Am I running, was it UConn that awful, or is Maryland's offense actually not going to drop off the way I thought it might with Talia gone and new O-line starters and a new quarterback because they looked awesome? Was a lot of that UConn maybe being a lot worse defensively maybe than we thought. But either way, current lean for me is Maryland laying the points. I can't trust Michigan State after what I saw on offense on the road here in this setting. What do you think here, C-Mac? Michigan State, Maryland.
Ugh, this is ugly. Maryland was good. I think UConn, was that bad. I didn't think the defense would be that bad. Just awful gash. And the offense, they moved it, but then they just turned the ball over. Like, that was another thing. Maryland, I talked about how high their turnovers were last year. They're going to get 3, I think, that they had last week, or 4. They're gonna do well when you win the turnover battle like that. Because I still don't think their defense is great. But you got a Michigan State team. Are they going to really push it here and do anything, especially this week in this game? I'm not so sure. I don't want anything to do with this one. I think Maryland, I'd lean that way. I really don't want to lay 8.5 of them. Even at home. I got to see a little more. But yeah, that's where I'd be.
All right, nothing wrong with that. We move on to UTSA. Texas San Antonio, the Roadrunners meet against Texas State, the Bobcats. Nice little in-state group of 5 battle here. Texas State 1 point road home favorites, 64 being the total in this game. This is a great football game. UTSA, we know, is still going to be one of the top teams in the AAC this year. Texas State in their conference, the Sun Belt. I think they can win the Sun Belt. I think that highly of them. And 2 teams expected to have, do good things this year. And neither of these teams against their opponent last week were overly impressive. UTSA, 28-16. over Kennesaw State, playing their first game in FBS in Conference USA. Not that impressive, to be honest with you, from UTSA. Not even close to covering the numbers, 23.5-point favorites. The defense kind of struggled a little bit. Kennesaw, especially in the secondary, giving up over 200 passing yards. I did like Owen McCown's game. He looked really good, the new starting quarterback. He had a good bowl game for UTSA, replacing Frank Harris, who had been there forever. 340 passing yards, 3 touchdowns. Couldn't run the football, though, against Kennesaw. My goodness, 76 rushing yards on 34 attempts. That is not good. That means you're having trouble holding up at the line of scrimmage with that offensive line. That's not what I want to see from UTSA. So that's definitely a concern that I have of them going into this game. I guess the concern for Texas State is 34-27 against Lamar. Not that impressive, especially on defense through the secondary, giving up 237 passing yards, but their run defense was good. And again, UTSA couldn't run the football, so it's a good matchup for their run defense against UTSA. Can the secondary hold up against McCown is the question. Meanwhile, I love Jordan McLeod and the transfer get that they got from James Madison. They lost A.J. Finley, no downgrade at all. Jordan McLeod's a good quarterback to run G.J. Kinney's offense, 238 passing yards, 3 touchdowns, 1 interception for him last week. Offense was fine against Lamar. I guess it was their secondary that was a little problematic. They did have a lead at one point, kind of let Lamar back into it, kind of sleepwalk effort, if you will. I think they'll be better here. I still like the talent that's on display for Texas State. I got to admit, at a pick 'em, I'm leaning Texas State. I think for UTSA, I'd be a little more concerned for them now going on the road after what I saw. And I'm with Robert Franklin here, who posted over in this game. I lean that way too. Texas State's going to play fast. Their offense, I think, is the strength of the team. I think when you look at UTSA defensively, Kennesaw going from that offense to Texas State now on the road is going to be a culture shock, I think. This is going to be a much taller order for the Roadrunners on defense here as well. So right now I'm leaning Texas State, leaning over as far as the side and total here in a really good group of 5 games. C-Mac, what do you think? UTSA, Texas State.
Yeah, I think these teams, just kind of coasted through their both their games week 1. Yeah. UTSA,
kind of like we're ready for this one more than
the
of last week, right?
28-16, and then Texas State against Lamar, 34-27. What you just said, I looked at the summer. I thought it was pretty sharp right there. We started getting the 60s, but they cashed me, especially in college football when I like it. I like the over too, especially I wouldn't really go higher than this, but I think both offenses should be able to move the football. And it was pretty key, like you were mentioning, against Lamar to move the ball that well against Texas State. It was just crazy. 237 passing yards. Wild. So Texas State here, I don't know if they really win this game big, but I think you get the over. I think we get fireworks and plenty of points. And I'm not so sure UTSA's defense, is that well. I mean, I think Texas State should put it on them too. So I agree with you here, Ben, on this over. I like it.
All right, liking the over as well as C-Mac. All right, Middle Tennessee State, Ole Miss. We've got Ole Miss 41.5-point home favorites, 63.5 the total. I'll say this about Ole Miss. Furman's not chopped liver in the FCS. They're not. They're actually a solid FCS program, Furman Paladins. I believe they're top 20. Yeah, top 20.
They're decent,
coming into the season. Ole Miss just laid fucking waste to them, man. That was impressive. And keep in mind how good Jackson Dart looked in the bowl game that they played. They beat Penn State, right? In the bowl game last year, Ole Miss. And he looked awesome against a really good team, really good defense. And he absolutely lit the fuck up that Furman defense last week. This guy looks like he's ready to be, I think, an upper echelon quarterback in the country this year, honestly, Jackson Dart. And I wasn't so sure about that with him early last season, but this is a guy that's made leaps and bounds improvement as far as I'm concerned in Lane Kiffin's offense. There's no denying how awesome he looked and how awesome the Ole Miss offense looked in that destruction over Furman. Now, this will be a little bit tougher, obviously, now going to against Middle Tennessee State. But I'll tell you this right now about Middle Tennessee. This is a program circling the drain. They should have lost against Tennessee Tech. And I was on Tennessee Tech plus the points. Tennessee Tech could have won that game outright. There was nothing really that I was impressed with Middle Tennessee. Their offense was stagnant. I've seen enough of this Nick Vadiato kid. He can't play. He's just not that good at the quarterback spot for Middle Tennessee. I don't like the Derek Mason hire. What did he do at Vanderbilt to give him another coaching opportunity? That program really didn't get all that much better, leaps and bounds, under his tutelage. And now here he is at Middle Tennessee. I know firing Rick Stockstill to freshen things up, switch it up, change of voice after so long that he had been there. But Derek Mason's the guy you go out and get? Really? Didn't like the hire. Don't like the direction of this Middle Tennessee program. And there's no freaking way I'm taking them here. This is lay it or stay off. Because if Ole Miss is putting up what they did last week against Furman, they're very capable of exploding on the scoreboard again here in this matchup against Middle Tennessee. I do not trust the Blue Raiders, not one bit. And they don't have the offense or the quarterback with Vadiato if they fall behind either. Keep that in mind. So this is lay it with the favorite or pass for me. Ole Miss plays at Wake Forest next week. So that is a bigger game on deck, but it's not like it's a conference game. So I don't think it's the biggest look-ahead spot for Ole Miss. I'll be honest, I'm tempted to lay the points with Ole Miss. That's how down I am on Middle Tennessee. They should be 0-1. They should have lost as 24.5-point favorites to Tennessee Tech last week. Not a program going in the right direction at all. C-Mac, what do you think?
Yeah, they are not a program going in the right direction. But I'm interested now here. Vano and the points with them. I think even though I don't love them a lot, this is a little bit overreaction. I think, they were up 24-11, fall asleep. They take the lead and scratch out that win. And they don't look good. Ole Miss looks really good against Furman, 76-0. And, yeah, I mean, Jackson Dart, I mean, he's always great. You mentioned that the bowl win versus Penn State, 38-25. I think he'll be great all year. How good will this Ole Miss defense be, especially in the big games? Can he come through? But I think his stats will be through the roof. And they're at home in this one. I think they put up, 50 again. But I think Middle Tennessee can score a little bit. I like the points with here. It's just a shit ton. But this over.
Yep.
How could we not? I mean, I think this is one, too, that I thought, it's still at 63. I just think, Ole Miss will score at will. Middle Tennessee will get a little bit here, and this game gets over.
All right, liking the over. And like I said, I think Ole Miss can get a lot of those 63.5 points by themselves probably here in this game if they're on anything close to what they showed against Furman, if they're on point that much offensively. All right, Marshall and Virginia Tech. We've got the Hokies, 20-point home favorites, 50-50.5 being the total in this game. Obviously disappointing, to say the least, for Virginia Tech against Vanderbilt. Almost 2 touchdown road favorites. They lose outright to the Commodores. But again, you're facing a very experienced quarterback in game one, Diego Pavia, who's a very good quarterback. The Virginia Tech defense was not that great in that game. And the offense didn't look good for a half. I will say this, though, about Virginia Tech, C-Mac. When they got that offense going in the second half, Vanderbilt had a hard time stopping it. And they showed the potential that Chiron Drones in this offense has when it's going. And in the second half, they got it going. It was just a little too late for them in that game. Drones, 22 of 33. Again, he was much better in the second half after a bit of a tough start. It is concerning, 30 rushes, 75 rushing yards, trouble running the football against Vanderbilt. That would be concerning. I don't know if it shows up here, though, against Marshall. We'll have to wait and see. Marshall played Stony Brook in their first game, an FCS opponent, 45-3. Not a particularly great FCS opponent either. I think there's reasons to like Virginia Tech here in a bounce-back spot. I'm not ready to say, you lost to Vanderbilt. I was totally wrong about this team. They're no good. They're still. I still think they're an above-average ACC team. Maybe not an elite. Maybe not the contender. I thought maybe coming into the year, but this is not a team that I think we're ready to throw in the garbage can just yet after one game. And I look against a Vanderbilt team that could be better and has a good experienced quarterback who had a great year last year at New Mexico State. So I'm pumping the brakes on, Virginia Tech. We really got them wrong heading into the season. I'm pumping the brakes on that sentiment. I'm still not a big believer in what they're doing here at Marshall, to be quite honest with you. They've taken money. I'm going to need to see more from Stone Earl, the quarterback here. And like I said, Virginia Tech in a kind of a bounce-back spot. Pride shows up after a tough loss to begin the year back home. This is one of those deals where I might do a double up here. Virginia Tech first half, Virginia Tech full game. First half might even be the better look. I think they come out storming here. And like I said, Marshall ain't playing Stony Brook this week. And by the way, I think if you go back to last year with Virginia Tech, in this
Drones
kind of
played, right? They met last year. I was just making sure Drones played. Okay, yeah, all right.
That's another thing too. It's a revenge spot too, because last year in September, Marshall won 24-17 at Marshall. But you look at the year before that, a lot of the games at Virginia Tech with these two teams pretty lopsided. Like I say, with this Virginia Tech team right now, let me actually, you know what? That Marshall game. Let me just, he did play that. I just wanted to make sure he did play that.
Yeah,
it
me
wasn't
too.
Grant Wells, which is a big difference. It would be. I'm not ready to give up on Virginia Tech just yet. If I'm playing, it would be a first half full game split, laying the points for me with Va Tech here. C-Mac, what do you think? Marshall, Virginia Tech.
Yeah, I think Virginia Tech comes back home. Great spot. And I think they move the rock with Drones, but I have issues with that defense. I know it was at Vandy. I talked about it last week.
Yep.
A lot of love for Virginia Tech, but, Vandy with Pavia, 2 touchdown almost dogs. I didn't know they won outright, which was huge in this one. Marshall, they played all right, had a big fourth quarter that made it look bigger, but they outgained Stony Brook 549 to 252. Braxton was all right, and that'll be a key. Can Virginia Tech, slow down Braxton a little bit? If he's able to run a ton, it could be a problem in this matchup. So yeah, Virginia Tech though should be able to move it well, but they have 371 to Vandy. This number's too big. I know it's a great spot for them at home to jump on it, but to me, this is Marshall. Give me the points.
All right, there we go. Liking Marshall here on getting a healthy number of points, almost 3 touchdowns. All right, Sam Houston State and UCF. UCF 22.5-point home favorites, 58.5 the total. Sam Houston State outright didn't need the 10 points, 11 points they were getting in that game against Rice. What a performance from a team that all summer I said over their 4.5 win total. A much improved team in Conference USA. Now, granted, it's the weakest conference in college football, but I thought Sam Houston would be improved. I love what I saw from them, really both sides of the ball. They were opportunistic on defense, forcing turnovers from Rice early in that game. They capitalized on them. I thought they held up well at the line of scrimmage in that football game as well, in that 34-14 win. 178 rushing yards, 229 through the air. Was very impressed with Hunter Watson, the new starting quarterback here for Sam Houston. Played well. They ran the ball. They were good on defense. They frustrated E.J. Warner, a pretty decorated quarterback, getting him into Rice from Temple, forced him into 2 interceptions. There's a lot to like about Sam Houston. And the one thing I can say now, going back to last year, they're on one hell of a run as an underdog, catching points. I'm going back to the well here. Sam Houston plus 22.5. Now, this is a step up. This ain't Rice now. This is UCF. This is a very good Big 12 team. A Big 12 team that 57-3 against New Hampshire last week. KJ Jefferson looked pretty solid. The run game with RJ Harvey was dominant. But look, Sam Houston last week against Rice. Now, again, UCF's run game's a little bit more impactful, but 47 rushing yards on 18 rush attempts for Rice. That was it. So their run defense shut down Rice. UCF's a lot more potent ground attack and better offensive team, but I think Sam Houston still north of 3 touchdowns. I saw enough that they can hang around here, I think, in this game. And the one thing about UCF, they just overpowered New Hampshire at the line of scrimmage, ran the ball down their throat. That's all they had to do. KJ Jefferson still only completed 7 passes in that game against New Hampshire last week. Keep that in mind. And New Hampshire's breaking in a new quarterback and a new offense because that Brosmer kid, Max Brosmer, left New Hampshire, transferred to Minnesota, where he's now playing for the Golden Gophers. And so that was kind of a starting over offense that New Hampshire has that UCF kind of took advantage of. So not exactly the greatest test of the UCF defense there for the UCF defense facing that totally revamped New Hampshire offense. So, and then you factor in the scheduling situation, first ever Big 12 conference game for UCF next week on the road in Fort Worth at TCU. That seems like a little bit of a bigger game to me than this one. So, yeah, give me Sam Houston State one more time as an underdog. Hey, give it to me one more time. Once is never enough. What's that song? Yeah, that's what I'm doing here with Sam Houston State. C-Mac, what do you think?
Yeah, you know what? I think UCF wins this football game, but this 3 touchdowns, Sam Houston just keeps cashing tickets for me as well. And if they're UCF will be able to run it, it just can't contain it a little bit, And Jefferson, yeah, he's just not the greatest passer. 7 of 14, we saw it hit and miss at Arkansas. But man, 22 and a half. And I like them at home, one of the better teams at the bounce house. But this is huge. And one thing, if they run a ton, there's not a huge plays. If Sam Houston could just stingy because they want to run it too. I thought the total was a little bit high. I got to look into a little bit more, but I think there might be points, but I kind of lean under in this game.
All right, next up, this is an interesting one. South Florida and Alabama. These two teams played last year, and let's put it this way. I think it's going to be a much different output of points scored in this game compared to last year. Alabama, 31-point home favorites, 64 being the total in this game. And, of course, I'm referencing the matchup last year with these two teams, Alabama and USF, South Florida. And keep in mind, it was 17-3 Alabama, but that game was played with a hurricane or a tropical storm, or there was some kind of like big-time weather system just really impacting that game as far as the points. And it was windy, and that played a factor in it as well, and it ended up being 17-3 in favor of Alabama. Look, South Florida offensively, I love what I see from this group, led by Byron Brown, the quarterback. Like I say, they've got a good run game. Whether that works against Alabama is a question. This is a team that only scored 3 points against Alabama last year, but no doubt the offense is good. And the defense has improved for South Florida this year, in my opinion. But you got to face Alabama and what they can throw at you. And look, it was Western Kentucky. It's not the best litmus test, but that offense looked like scary good for Alabama with the combination of Jalen Milroe at quarterback, Kalen DeBoer at head coach. He brings one of Nick Sheridan as his OC, and he was on the Washington coaching staff with DeBoer last year. They look fucking scary after just one game on offense. Like they just moved the ball at will. You want a crazy stat line? Jalen Milroe, 7 completions for the football game, 7 for 200 passing yards, 3 touchdowns, 7 for 9, 200 passing yards. The run game was dominant. Justice Haynes had 102 rushing yards. Milroe ran for 79. So all this nonsense, too, that I read. Kalen DeBoer is going to turn Jalen Milroe into a pocket passer because it's what he prefers, and that's what happened with Penix at Washington. He's not that stupid. He's not the great 105 and 12 as a head coach for being an idiot. He knows Milroe's a gifted athlete. He knows Milroe's got a tremendous ability to run with the football. He is not going to take that away from Jalen Milroe. And we saw that. Yes, he's going to probably throw a little bit more, get Milroe throwing the ball more than last year and incorporate him and improve his pocket passing. And I think he will. He already showed it last week. He was really good throwing the football, and he got better last year with working with DeBoer for a full year. He's going to get even better throwing the ball. But he's not going to take away Milroe and his ability to run. He's a good coach. He knows that's a strength of his. And we had 10 carries for 79 rushing yards for Jalen Milroe. And then you go down further, Jam Miller, Ty Simpson. I mean, they've got a running back by committee. Very impressive. They had over 600 yards against Western Kentucky. I do worry about South Florida's defense, which I know has improved. But, I mean, my goodness, there were certain times last year South Florida would give up points still. And against offense is a lot inferior to Alabama and the likes they're going to see here on Saturday. So this is not one dog I'm interested in. I want to back South Florida. There'll be spots. I'm not sure this is it. DeBoer's been a good favorite in non-conference play. He's been a good over coach as well. And that's probably the bet I like most here in this game is over 64. I think Alabama's probably high 40s or 50s. But unlike last week where Western Kentucky got goose-egged, and their quarterback play stunk. I think Byron Brown in South Florida is good enough on the O-line, good enough in the skill positions and at quarterback to at least maybe put 10, 14 points on the board here against Alabama and help out with this over. C-Mac, what do you think here?
Yeah, I just think this, last year, the problems that were going on early on, you mentioned a little bit of the weather, the whole deal, and it being in South Florida, and just the flat dud that they had. And now they're back at home after Big One where they play South Florida. I can't be on them too. This team, though, I want to, though, during the year. And you mentioned like that game and some others, the defense looked okay, but other games they went back and just got killed. They got cashed. They give up, 45. What was that one here? Where are we at right here? South Florida. Temple to Memphis game 59-50. So the defense is up and down. They lost to FIU 56-14. They lost to UAB 56-35. So as much as I like Brown and South Florida, I don't know how much they can do in this game. And can they score a little bit? Yeah, Alabama got that total all on their own last week and easily covered. It's been one like Alabama first half and even their team total or the first half just over. I think again the defense looked good. For Western Kentucky, Finley he was awful. Only 92 yards, 18-31, nothing downfield, and 2 interceptions. So, yeah, the Alabama defense looked great. How can you not after a goose egg? So, I think Bama wins here big.
Yeah, I mean, look, I know people have said for a long time Nick Saban for the longest time wasn't the greatest non-conference bigger favorite. Well, this ain't Nick Saban anymore, right? This is Kalen DeBoer now, and Kalen DeBoer in his first game as a big favorite in non-conference looked pretty damn good last week. 63-0, obviously, covered the number with ease. So I think there's some truth to what Robert is saying in the chat. I read somewhere that Kalen DeBoer will try and drop the hammer on everybody. That's very possible, and it certainly looked that way last week. So, yeah, there'll be times to bet South Florida, but for me, this week ain't one of those times. All right, next up, Buffalo and Missouri. We've got Missouri 34.5-point home favorites, 51 being the total here in this game. There's another one, too, where Buffalo, I like the hire of Pete Lembo. And look, Buffalo looked solid. Buffalo's had problems beating FCS teams at home. They've been upset by FCS teams at home. So for them to not just win, but win easily against Lafayette in their first game is a good sign. But now you're on the road. You're facing Missouri. That's going to be a question mark here. I think for this game for Missouri, I'd be more interested maybe in a team total over rather than laying 34.5. Take out the notion of what Buffalo does or does not do on offense against Missouri, but Missouri should be able to move the football at will here against Buffalo as long as they are focused. And by the way, too, we did see obviously Brady Cook come out of that game early last week against Murray State, but like I said, Murray State's a terrible FCS team. I think Brady probably will stay in the game a little bit longer. They play Boston College at home next week. BC was very impressive, though, against Florida State. That being said, it's not the biggest look-ahead spot for Missouri. So I think Brady Cook and that dynamic offense, and how's Buffalo's secondary going to hold up against Luther Burden and some of these just phenomenal NFL-bound receivers that Missouri has at their disposal? And they go 4 or 5 deep at receiver, not just Luther Burden, but you look at what else they have there with Mookie Cooper and Marquise Johnson, Theo Weiss. I mean, it's a very impressive receiving core for Missouri. So I think Buffalo's secondary doesn't match up well against it. So I haven't bet anything yet, but I do lean a little team total over for Missouri. C-Mac, what do you think here?
Yeah, I get that with Missouri. This seems like, with Cook, this team, another game they could win really big, but I don't really want to lay 35 points. And I need – I got to dig a little bit. There's a few of these teams like this. I'm back into Buffalo. I just went through the box score late last night versus Lafayette. It wasn't great, very average. Would they win 30-13, I believe?
Yeah.
It wasn't impressive. I don't know how they're going to really throw it. Well, they ran the ball okay, but can they run against Missouri? I don't think so. So it'll be tough. I get the Missouri, or maybe the Missouri team total in this one.
All right, next up, we've got Kansas and Illinois. Kansas Jayhawks, 5.5-point Road favorites this game in Champaign, Illinois, 55.5 being the total here in this game. It seems like every year, whether it's college football or college basketball, they put Kansas and Illinois together head-to-head in a game, and it looks like they are doing that again here. Of course, these teams met last year in Lawrence, Kansas, in non-conference action, and last year it was a 34-23 victory for Kansas in that game. We'll see how they fare here in this one. Very important to point out when it comes to Kansas here going into this game that I just want to clarify whether I think Jalen Daniels was still healthy at that time when they played Illinois last year. Yes, he was. So Jalen Daniels did play for Kansas last year against Illinois. So that's important to point that out. 34-23, they won by 11 in that game. Now they're 5.5-point road favorites here in the rematch. Like I say, a healthy Daniels to go with Devin Neal at running back, to go with Arnold and Grimm and Skinner, the three receivers that they've got. Kansas, like I say, they've got a great allotment of skill position weapons. Obviously, in their first game, they dismantled Lindenwood 48-3 in that game, but not the greatest FCS team. Illinois took down EIU, Eastern Illinois, 45-0. We'll see how they fare on the road here in this game. To be honest with you, or actually at home, I should say, here in this one, as at home, they haven't been great. Champaign's not been a great home field for them. Look at last year. 3-point favorites, Nebraska, lose outright by 13. 5-point favorites against Indiana. They do win, but only by 3. And that was a bad Indiana team last year. They lose by 4 at home to Wisconsin. They lose outright as favorites against Northwestern late in the season. It's not been a good home field for Illinois. I'll be honest. I think Kansas is not just a little bit the better team, certainly the better offense, and certainly the better core. I'm not a Luke Altmaier guy. I'm not. I've said that before. I know he put up a 45 spot on EIU last week, but not playing Eastern Illinois this week. I don't know. I think the number's just a little bit short. I had this closer to 7 with Kansas here. 5.5, it's Kansas for me if I'm betting it. C-Mac, what do you think?
Yeah, I get it. Yeah, if this was 7, I'd like Illinois a little bit more. Towards the end of last year, they got into these shootouts. So Northwestern, where they lost by 2.
Oh, for Big Leipold over Bielema, quite honestly. Coaching-wise. Yep.
Yeah. It depends who you like. Yeah, Bielema is just – yeah, I didn't think it was ever really going to succeed, there at Illinois. It kind of is what it is. That crazy game against Indiana and Altmaier, I have a problem too. They lost at home, Wisconsin by 4. I'd like the touchdown, and I think Kansas is a little bit better, a little bit more talented, obviously with Daniels and Neal, some of the receivers that they got. But is the defense any better? I don't know. Altmaier just hangs over my head, some of these quarterbacks, that can change the game and some of his passes. But I love that touchdown. But even 5.5, I'm very interested in Illinois here at home. I think they keep this game tight.
All right, next up, and this is the Saturday night matchup on ABC. It's probably the game I would think that Chris Fowler and Kirk Herbstreit, and maybe his dog Ben might be there too, Kirk's dog, who's in the booth sometimes. Tennessee and NC State. We've got Tennessee 7.5-point road favorites here in Raleigh, North Kakalaki, 60.5 the total. If you want an indication of how one result for each team can just influence a point spread, this is that game. Tennessee against Chattanooga last week, dominant. Outstanding. And I'm telling you what, I know it wasn't the best opponent, but Nico Iamaleava right now for Tennessee looks like the real fucking deal at quarterback. He really does. He's got all the tools. He can run. He's athletic. He's mobile. His accuracy, pinpoint, good arm. There's a lot to like with Nico here with this Tennessee offense. He fits Josh Heupel's up-tempo spread offense perfectly. And they look like they're going to be back to the Tennessee that a couple of years ago was putting up big points with Hendon Hooker at quarterback. They look like they're going to be that kind of offense again, Tennessee. Meanwhile, NC State couldn't have looked much worse. Struggling to get by at home against Western Carolina. They were losing for most of that game. And then they end up pulling it out right at the end. Defense, which has been great for NC State, was giving up some yardage on the ground, some plays through the air. Not the greatest defensive effort, and more importantly, this much improved offense we expected from NC State this year with a transfer quarterback from Coastal, one of the most veteran, experienced quarterbacks in the country this year, Grayson McCall. Oh my goodness, not very good. And Grayson McCall, man, Not one of his better games. Concerning, to say the least, here for NC State, especially now that you're taking a big step up in class here against Tennessee. But I think all of that shit's factored into the number now, because this opened with Tennessee, 4.5, 5. It quickly went to 6.5, went to 7. It's gone through the key number now, 7.5. I'm even seeing 8 starting to show up now. 8 with Tennessee as road favorites here. I don't know if I'm ready to get there yet with Tennessee now at this number, but I've got concerns about NC State after what I saw last week. And man, that defense better be ready to be better than they were last week against Western Carolina, because that Tennessee offense, they look like they're going to be back to their put up big points and quick strike offense and just explode on the scoreboard at any given moment. So really intriguing game because I thought NC State, before last week and was going to be able to hang toe-to-toe with Tennessee, and maybe they still can. And I do think there's a little value now on NC State at home. But, boy, that Western Carolina performance was an eyesore for me from the Wolfpack. What do you think here, C-Mac? Very intriguing game. Saturday night, Tennessee, NC State.
This is the early in the year type thing. Like, if we get McCall settled in better, this is like week 8. And maybe the line's a little bit different, but I think there's a little overreaction here. I love how Tennessee just played, and NC State didn't look great. They still have McCall here at quarterback. It's the biggest difference here is the defense. It needs to be better. This is one that need to get to work this week. Will the Wolfpack? One thing what's just been a success for me, and especially the last few years, and they've had some losses. This is where early in the year, Tennessee could go in there and win by a couple touchdowns. But the Wolfpack at home as a dog, it's just the numbers have been too good. I've cashed way too many.
I want to clarify one thing I got wrong, and we want to get right here on the show. This is not in Raleigh, this game. This is not
this is where is it at? Virginia?
It's in North Carolina. It's in Charlotte, Bank of America Stadium, where the Carolina Panthers play. So it's in Charlotte, this game.
Okay. Yeah. Well, that's
but still, it's closer for NC State proximity wise.
No, I'm glad you said that, because I didn't see that on the thing when I looked in here. Yeah, Bank of America right here. There's the weather, 72. Well, I'm glad you said that. Yeah. So right now, still, I got to look into it more then, because I thought they were at home. I did not see that.
But the Vols, that burnt orange crowd will travel. That's for sure.
Oh, yeah. I think both teams will be there big. So, yeah, I'm going to look into a little bit more here. This maybe one is Tennessee. Maybe they roll then, because I thought the Wolfpack were at home. Thanks for bringing that up, because I was not on top of that. Thanks.
Yeah, McCall, look, actually, he did have 3 touchdowns, 318 through the air still. But you know what the problem was, too? I thought the offensive line. I mean, I had some concerns with them. They didn't hold up as well as I thought against Western Carolina. So that unit's got to improve. The whole offense, I thought, was going to be a lot better. I didn't see enough of it, for parts of that. I know they ended up still putting up 38, but, man, I think they just wore down a tired Western Carolina team in the fourth quarter. 21 of the points came in the fourth. For 3 quarters, that was not an impressive.
Oh, yeah, and right away they got slapped. Like, they weren't awake in that game. I think they scored 14 in that first quarter. Like, it was 14-7 quick. So how much is that? There's these teams just out of it, but they moved the ball. Western Carolina definitely moved the rock, on this Wolfpack defense.
It's a great game to watch, though. It's a very we're going to find out a lot about both the Vols and the Wolfpack. It's one of those deals where if I had gotten Tennessee early, I'd be looking maybe to buy back in middle a little bit now on NC State, but I'd missed out on the best number with Tennessee, and I don't feel like I'm running to bet against Nico after what I saw. After what I saw in the bowl, and don't forget what he did in the bowl game, C-Mac. People are talking about, you got to play NC State's defense right now. Did we fucking see what Nico Iamaleava did in the bowl game against Iowa? One of the better defenses in college football. He lit him up.
Oh, yeah, lit him up. 35-0.
So this guy looks for real at quarterback here for Tennessee. And if he's lighting up Iowa's defense in the bowl game, what could he do here against NC State? Something to keep an eye on. All right, next up, we've got Western Michigan and Ohio State. Ohio State 38-point home favorites, 54 the total in this game. Cashed an easy one with Western Michigan at Wisconsin last week. No sweat, wire to wire. They were in that game start to finish. They led in the second half. Pretty impressive stuff from Western Michigan, although you could say that Tyler Van Dyke and the Wisconsin offense wasn't that great for a good chunk of the game. But no, there were good things to see from Western Michigan. I thought their defense looked better. They look like a team that can win the MAC. Western Michigan, Bowling Green. I mean, there are teams that are coming for Toledo and Miami, Ohio, and all the usual, contenders in the MAC. Those are going to be two teams to watch out for when we get into conference play. Solid first game. They lose 28-14 to Wisconsin. They got away from them late. Really, the damaging part of that loss for Western Michigan was they had Wisconsin on the ropes, and then that fumble of the punt return that set Wisconsin up in the red zone to just kind of put that game or turn the momentum of that game right around. And I don't think Western Michigan ever recovered from that. Hayden Wolf was solid, though, 12 of 18, 141. The run game with Jalen Buckley leading the way. It was a grind, but, I still think, considering you're on the road against Wisconsin, pretty solid. The defense was impressive for me. You are playing now. Ohio State will be tougher, obviously, than Wisconsin. But Ohio State, man, they looked asleep for a half and really didn't get going until the second half, finally putting away Akron 52-6. It was not the greatest first half for the offense. Will Howard eventually kicked it into gear. The one thing I'll say is they are loaded at skill positions. I mean, Travion Henderson, Quinshad Judkins, the two running backs, Mecca Egbuka, Carnell Tate, and then this freshman, man, just his first game in college, Jeremiah Smith, he was phenomenal for Ohio State. So they've really got a ton of weapons there. Western Michigan was good to me last week. Do I want to go back to the well here? I guess is the grand question. I'm certainly not looking to lay 38 with Ohio State. And Ohio State, though, does have a bye next week, and then they play Marshall. So you do have to remember that. There's no look ahead here at all for the Buckeyes. In fact, they're on a bye after this. So this is a taller order for Western Michigan. But boy, I was impressed. Can they hang within 38? Akron covered. I'll say that 52-6. Akron was what, 49.5 point dogs, and they covered. And really, it shouldn't have been that 52-6. All the points were late for Ohio State in that game. So I would lean Western a little bit, but I don't like Western this week as much as I did last week. C-Mac, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm the same. I had to take those points last week, and I mean up 14-13 there, in the fourth before those late touchdowns. Wolf, the fumble, they had the fumble. He had a pick, which wasn't great, but they moved the ball. But yeah, and I'm just not high on that Wisconsin team I talked about. They shouldn't be laying that big a number. Ohio State a little bit asleep early, but yeah, just put the boots to them. This was one, I think Ohio State, instead of laying it, look at their team total or go this full game over. It just got over with Akron, but if Western Michigan just scores a little bit there, I think it might be a little light. It seems like they could get 45 or more on their own and see if Western Michigan get a few scores. So I think that could get over. I'm leaning that way too. We have so many games. I don't know if I go back and want to take Western Michigan in the end, but I definitely lean them in the points.
All right, one of the bigger ones Saturday night, old school Big Ten rivalry. And yes, C-Mac and I are fucking old enough now. We're old geezers. We remember when Colorado, Nebraska was a Big Ten rivalry.
Oh, yeah.
Big 12 rivalry back in the day. And here they are again, old rivals from 20, 30 years ago, squaring off once again. Nebraska 7-point home favorites in Lincoln, 57.5. The total is on NBC on Saturday night. And by the way, they've got Paul Burmeister and Colt McCoy in the booth making his debut now that he's retired. It's because Noah and Todd, the usual crew on Saturday night for NBC College, they're doing the Friday night NFL game on Peacock in Brazil for the Packers and the Eagles. So that's why there's a little bit of a switcheroo going on with the broadcasters. I'm the broadcast nut, so only I would know that, but there you go. Nebraska, with the 7-point home favorites here in this game. Look, Colorado's got issues in the trenches. I mean, look, North Dakota State's a top-tier FCS team, but the defensive line had no pass rush. Running the football was North Dakota State was able to, including the quarterback runs, really hurt Colorado. And then the secondary looked lost at times for Colorado. So I'm still not sold on that defense. North Dakota State moved the football pretty successfully for most of that game. And Dylan Raiola looked excellent. Now, first start, UTEP, not the same, obviously, as Colorado, but I was impressed, man. This guy got the chance to be one of the better quarterbacks Nebraska's had in quite some time. I was very impressed with the young 5-star freshman. Looked the part in that first game against UTEP. We'll see how he fares here in this game, but it's not like Colorado's defense looked phenomenal at all. So I think Nebraska can move the ball. But you have Shedeur Sanders on the other side. And look, UTEP kind of starting over. UTEP, with a lot of new faces on offense. Nebraska's defense was awesome last week, but I think it's safe to say Colorado and Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter at receiver and Jimmy Horn Jr. and all the weapons they've got are going to be a taller order for Nebraska's defense here in this game. Again, kind of one of those deals where I know for Colorado, the offense is the superior unit. No question. And the O-line is still an issue, but Shedeur Sanders is good enough to escape it. And he had to do that a million times, and he made some great plays escaping pressure. And that is still a concern. Can that O-line hold up for Colorado? Because it's still a work in progress. But I still think the offense is ahead of the defense for Colorado. I think Nebraska's got a pretty good defense, but I think the offense is much improved. And I think Nebraska's defense, for as good as they are, Colorado can test them. And I definitely think Raiola and the Nebraska offense can move it against this Buffalo's defense. I did not see a lot against North Dakota State that told me, C-Mac, this is a much better Colorado defense this year, not based on what I saw. So I think points are in the making on Saturday night. I like this one over the number, 57.5. C-Mac, what do you think?
Yeah, Paul, my dude, we went over that a little bit earlier. So just check that out, and we'll clip it out as well. Yeah, I waited till that the total dropped, and it just it got over. And, of course, North Dakota covered against Colorado, 31-26. And both offenses were very good in that one. Colorado still can't stop anything. And I think the Nebraska defense is better. We talked about last week. That's what I was impressed with in the second half of the season. And this is a revenge, kind of spot here for Nebraska. I think it was week 2 last year where they lost.
And they played better than the final score indicated because Jeff Sims treated the fucking football.
That was that horrible game.
Turned it over constantly.
Yeah, I remember that game, 36-14. Yeah, he was just turnover machine. Yeah. And Raiola, he looked good. UTEP, just, has real problems right now. But he's a little Pat Mahomes, as they got, looking like him, walking like him, throwing like him. But this would be a big one at home. I think Nebraska can win. I'm at the point now. Do I trust this defense enough to lay over a touchdown? No. And I think there's points too. I don't know if we get over this number. I'm going to watch this one the rest of the week because I do think we're going to get some points back and forth. Because I think Sanders, you mentioned Hunter, all these guys can move the ball. That offensive line though is all year he's going to be running for his life, just trying to make plays, and hopefully he doesn't get hurt because they still have problems there. But I think we can get some points in this game. Lean over.
Yeah, Robert, I'm not as bullish on the side as you, but I'm telling you right now, I am not on Colorado in this game. It's Nebraska or nothing.
Yeah, I don't really want them.
Yeah.
No. But I don't want Nebraska either.
A rare Saturday night primetime home game in Lincoln, Nebraska for the Cornhuskers. They've got the better defense. Yeah, it's lay the points or nothing for me as far as the side goes in this one. I agree with Robert and Paul, who in our chat, who both like Nebraska here in this one. All right, Houston, Oklahoma. We've got the Sooners, 29-point home favorites, 49 the total in this game. Oklahoma looked awesome on defense last week, but Temple's pretty pathetic on offense, and I don't think they're going to be very good on offense all year. I was concerned a little bit about Oklahoma's offense, though. I know they still ended up winning and covering the number, but they had, I think, a defensive score as well against Temple last week. I mean, there were times that the offensive line, believe it or not, didn't block or had trouble blocking Temple. And that offensive line was the concern for Oklahoma coming into the year, so that's something to watch out for here. And I cashed a ticket with Oklahoma, but it was more of a fade of Temple. I don't know if I'd lay this many here with them here in this spot. That O-line, they did still have to punt like a handful of times against Temple, man. The concerns on offense still. And I like Jackson Arnold. They showed what he can do at quarterback, but that O-line there were times when Temple was getting to the quarter, couldn't run the football against Temple a little bit at times. Pass protection broke down a couple times, and that's against Temple. That would concern. Defense looked awesome. Defense looked the part of one of the better defenses, which people expected. And that's going to be trouble here for Houston, right? That the offense did not look good at all, just getting whipped by UNLV 27-7 last week. Donovan Smith was atrocious, 50% completions, 2 interceptions, no touchdowns. They couldn't run the football. I don't see Houston doing much offensively here against Oklahoma on the road. But is Oklahoma going to go up and down the field against Houston when their O-line at times couldn't block or protect against Temple? That was a real eye-opener for me. Don't be fooled by the score. Oklahoma's offensive line at times had issues with Temple. That concerns me here. Under makes the most sense to me here in this game. C-Mac, what do you think here? Houston, Oklahoma.
Well, if Houston can't move the ball or run it, and they gave up. That's what UNLV just, was just dominant in that game, which I was a little bit and the UNLV defense was solid. Was it as much as their defense was really good, or this offense was just awful recent, which it was. Smith had 2 picks. He didn't look good.
You know what's concerning too? I'll throw this out there about Houston's performance. This is a hell of a coach, Willie Fritz, who had all summer to get his team ready for this game, and they still looked like that.
And that's what, that's what they looked like against UNLV.
That tells me the cupboard's bare. This roster stinks. This is on Holgerson, by the way, because he left this in a fucking shambles, this program, for the fucking butcher job he did on this program. He did a number on this Houston program. He set him back years, Dana Holgerson, with his ineptitude and his shenanigans on the sideline all the time. As he's put Willie in a really tough spot. And I think it's going to be a tough season, unfortunately, for a very good coach.
Yeah, I think it's going to be tough for him. Oklahoma did what they were going to do. I don't think it was crazy impressive. They beat 51-3. I thought that they have these opening games with some of these teams that they win like that. It's like 62-0, 55-3. But they looked all right. Jackson looked good. For what they were against a bad Temple team. They're at home here. I think they win. I just don't want to lay points with them right now. I don't want Houston. This is just a game I stay off. Can Houston move the ball? Maybe look to their team total under, but this total's low as well. Babana.
I'm totally on board with the move.
It's dropped. Yeah, it's dropped. 3 points.
Totally on board with it. 52.5 down to 49. That 52.5 when it opened definitely looked a little too high, especially with what we saw from Houston. And Houston's going up against Oklahoma's defense is great. I'm not convinced yet on the O-line for Oklahoma, and that's why I think they'll score, but I don't know if they're going to light it up necessarily here against Houston. And I think that's what it would take for this game to go over the total. All right.
But Houston was bad. They gave up 200 yards on the ground to UNLV. Yeah, maybe it's a workman type win.
Yeah, that could be the case, especially with big or SEC games, bigger fish to fry coming up for Oklahoma on their schedule. All right, App State, Clemson. Clemson, 17.5-point home favorites, 53 the total. I'm on App State here, and I know App State didn't look pretty last week at all, believe it or not, against an FCS opponent. It was not a great performance, but honestly, from App State or from Aguilar, the quarterback for App State. It was very underwhelming, to say the least, the way they played in that game. But I'll tell you right now, with App State, I think they're better than they showed in that game, and I have no idea what to expect from Clemson. All I know is I'm okay taking my chances fading them as 17.5-point favorites with that fucking pop gun offense they've got right now. And I know it was Georgia, right? Obviously one of the top teams in the country, and you got to expect Clemson to play a little bit better here. But when you have expectations of being better, especially on offense, and you have expectations to compete with a team like Georgia, and you get absolutely manhandled and eviscerated like that, 34-3, and Dabo's talking what he was talking like after the game. He looked like a beaten man. He actually sounded beaten down for the first time, Dabo Swinney, after that Georgia loss last week. There's no fucking way I'm laying 17.5 with Clemson here in this spot. Now, I know App State at times, they've been Jekyll and Hyde in these step-up-in-class games. If you look at it in the past, they've had some games where they've got absolutely crushed, by some of the power teams that they've had to face. If you look at last year, there was a couple of games that were ugly. But I will say this. They had the North Carolina game. In overtime, they lost by 6. They showed they could be competitive there in that game. They only lost by 2, North Carolina, the year before, 2 seasons ago. And they had an 18-point dog upset win on the road against Texas A&M 2 years ago. App State went to College Station, beat A&M 17-14, September 10th, 2022, as 18-point dogs. So there's actually more good than bad when we've seen App State step up in class, getting points as a big dog against Power 4 competition. Outright upset against A&M 2 years ago as 18-point dogs. A cover and a 2-point loss to North Carolina 2 years ago, and a cover and a 6-point loss in overtime to North Carolina last year. You put it all together, yeah, App State or nothing for me in this point spread range. What do you think here, C-Mac?
Yeah, this seems like App State's going to be in this game, or they could maybe get their ass kicked, and it's a decent cover for Clemson. But I can't back.
Here's the thing,
Clemson.
though. People said Florida State in a great bounce-back spot last night. How did that go?
Oh, yeah, not me.
That's got what happened to Florida State Monday night on Labor Day against Boston College has me less interested in Clemson in this game for a bounce back.
Oh, for sure. And they're just going off. The only thing they can hang their hat on a little bit is their defense, which played well in that first half. They got away from it. Georgia just, pounded them. And that was the problem. Of course, they were facing Georgia, but that offense, we talked about it last week with Banner, it did it all last year. This team struggled. They struggled to score points. App State, not the best defense, so they should be able, score some here. I like App State too. I mean, Joey Aguilar, can he do enough? Robinson, he's got a pretty good wide receiver. They got a ground game. I think they could be in it too. Like, I don't really want to go, even with Clemson back at home, and lay 17.5 in this one at all. So I agree with you here. I think this is App State or nothing. Clemson's got to win with their defense. And is that blowout fashion? I don't buy it. Not yet, at least. I got to see more.
They do have to shore up the run defense a little bit, App State. That would be the one little area that I'd be concerned about.
They've had some problems, and Clemson should.
3 rushing yards. And Phil Maffa is a hell of a running back. That's one of the strengths, you could say, of Clemson's offense is their running back. Phil Maffa is pretty good. But where are the playmakers at receiver? I mean, Brenningstool's okay, but he shouldn't be your second receiver. I mean, Tyler Brown and Antonio Williams are okay, but there's just not a boatload of great wide receiver. And we've said that now for a few years about Clemson. Yeah. This is a program that was growing these phenomenal receivers year in and year out, and you just haven't seen it as much here the last couple. All right, Boise State and Oregon. Oregon, 19-point home favorites in Eugene, 61 the total. Let's just look at this from a pure spot perspective and scheduling standpoint for Boise. Boise goes all the way west to east, Georgia Southern, Statesboro, Georgia last week. They're in a barn burner with Georgia Southern. Don't be fooled by the final score. They had to work for that one, Boise State. No doubt about that. But their offense was awesome. Maddox Madsen was good throwing the ball, but more importantly, it was the Ashton Genty show. I don't know if I've seen a running back in a single game play that well in a long time. He was that good. He was unbelievable for Boise State. He's the reason Boise State survived that, because the Boise defense was not good at all. I mean, this new quarterback, J.C. French for Georgia Southern, he was moving the ball up and down against that secondary. That Boise defense has work to do. They got to get better. 45 points and giving up, 460 yards.
61,
that's not good enough. 322 through the air. That secondary got torched, quite honestly, by J.C. French in that game. But that Boise offense looks like the real deal. Madsen was good, efficient, and Ashton Genty, what can you say? Are you kidding me? 267 rushing yards in one fucking game. 6 rushing touchdowns. 6 from the running back, Ashton Genty. Are you shitting me? Unbelievable performance. He just basically staked his claim right there as to why he's one of the best running backs. I don't care. Power 4, group of 5, who gives a shit? He is one of the best running backs, period, right now in college football. No doubt about that. Man, that was a great offense, but that defense was ass. And now you're going on the road, and you're going from Georgia all the way back to Oregon, road for the second straight week against an Oregon offense that should be explosive and dynamic, except they weren't that explosive and dynamic last week against Idaho. I was stunned by that. I did not see that coming, that Dylan Gabriel and the Oregon offense would struggle to that level. 49-point favorites against Idaho. Never mind scoring 49. They didn't even score half of that. They scored 24 in that game. That was it. Now, he was efficient, 380 through the air, 41 of 49, but a lot of it was just dink and dunk. There wasn't a lot of big-time explosiveness. We'll see if that was just a one-off or if Oregon can kind of look more like the offense we expected. Defense was pretty good, I will say that. Only 49 rushing yards for Idaho, 168 through the air. The defense did look good. This is a really intriguing game. It's a lot of points with Boise. But it's Oregon. Like if Oregon plays like that on offense, they're not covering 19 here against Boise in this game. But it's a really tricky spot, CMAC, for Boise, right? You go down to Georgia, and now you're all the way back up and on the road again to Oregon here in the Pacific Northwest. That's a real tough 2-game back-to-back weeks road trip for Boise. Very, very tough game for me to gauge because to me, if Oregon plays like that on offense again this week, they're not covering 19. But if Boise State plays the way they did on defense last week, I could see Oregon getting their offense on track and making big plays with Gabriel and company. So I'm leaning over right now, honestly, in this game.
Yeah.
I think Oregon can get their offense going, and Boise clearly that offense looks very, very good, in my opinion. And what you got to be and I know they shut down the run last week, Oregon against Idaho, but see them do it here. Over is the stance I like most. I'm not really bullish on one side or the other at the current number of 19. CMAC, what do you think?
Yeah, I thought this number, I don't over here or nothing, right? I think there's a little bit of I know there's the overreaction, Boise, all those points and gave it up. But yeah, this travel spot's shit. And Oregon's going to be, this is what they're, this game, some of these games,
right? This is the bigger game for them.
Yeah. And there was a lot of ding and dunk. They had a ton of yards. Like Gabriel threw for 380. Like that, they should have had, a few more touchdowns. It just seemed, you know what I mean? With everything. It was sloppy though. When I went through some of these, I might have missed a few. But Ben, it was like this. Oregon, a lot of penalties. Like 8%, just everything. They just weren't. First game wasn't in sync. And Boise, that Georgia Southern defense just isn't good. But yeah, they moved the ball. I mean, as much as Boise lit it up, 650. You said 461 for Georgia Southern. I don't know how we don't get points in this one. I don't know. I'm going to mess with the side here in the week too, because I think this could be a bounce back for Oregon, but I don't really want to lay almost 3 touchdowns with them.
Yeah, you're preaching to the choir, Myron, about the Peacock complaints. You need a fucking roadmap and a compass this year to find out which network and which TV station has which college.
Yeah, to be everywhere.
Yes. Jesus. It's not easy to figure it out. You got to have you got to have that printout schedule right in front of you. So I know this is on Fox. This is on FS1. This is on Peacock. This is on ESPN, ESPN2. ESPN News.
I forgot that yesterday, Babana.
Sports Network. I could go on forever, yeah.
I forgot my sheet. I'm at Circa. I was at Circa last night, and I forgot the sheet because that's normally what I have here. So I left there, and I'm on the way home, and I go, I forgot the sheets. Because I always usually grab them Sunday nights. Yesterday was a Monday. So I'm like, oh, my God. Maybe I wouldn't have got the game, the neutral site, too, because that's always on there, the game where it's at. With NC State, since I had to do it all on my own.
Not to mention all the ESPN Plus games, because there's so many of those smaller games that are on ESPN Plus.
ESPNU
on there. That's how I watched Tennessee Tech, Middle Tennessee at the end. ESPN Plus had that one. It's trying to see if they would blow the game entirely there. All right. Next up, as we continue along here, we've got only a few left. We're down to the last 5. Texas Tech and Washington State. We've got Washington State 1.5-point home favorites, 65.5 the total in this game. I mean, how do you not have red flags about Texas Tech after last week? Holy mackerel! You talk about concerning. That's fucking Abilene Christian at home, really? And you're going to overtime with them, and you're giving up like 50 burger to Abilene fucking Christian at home? Ooh, that's a terrible look. That's a really bad look right there for Joey McGuire and his Texas Tech team. I had to dock them a little bit for that. That shouldn't happen. And they were lucky as fuck to get out of there alive with the win last week. The offense was good. It was solid. What the hell happened to the defense is what I have to ask for Texas Tech. A defense that I thought were making strides under this current coach. Not last week, though, in that 52-51 game. They give up 494 passing yards to Abilene Christian. That quarterback shredded that secondary.
Crazy.
Morton played a good game. Offense was fine. Defense was abysmal for Texas Tech. So they better sort that out quickly here against a Washington State team that just put up 70 on the board against Portland State in their first game and 413 passing yards in that game. John Mateer, the new quarterback for Washington State, really looked good. 352, 6 incomplete passes on 17 attempts, 5 touchdowns, no interceptions. He looked really good. And they're at home again here against a defense that couldn't stop a nosebleed last week. Over's the first thought for me in this game, clearly, if I'm getting involved. You have a Texas Tech offense with an experienced quarterback in Morton. They weren't an issue last week. The material looked really good. Now, yet the under's taking the money early in the week, but they obviously think Texas Tech's going to play better defense, and they're not sold on Mateer and the Washington State offense based on 70 points against an FCS team. But Portland State's supposed to be a decent FCS team. So I still have to come away very impressed with what the Cougs did on offense last week. So, yeah, for me, this would be Wazoo. The Palouse it's not easy to play in the Palouse, first of all. And second of all, how can I trust Texas Tech in a straight up win situation on the road with that defense after what I saw last week against Abilene Christian at home? So for me, this is a lean to the Wazoo side and certainly a lean to the over here. C-Mac, what do you think?
Yeah, this is just not the travel spot. I think Texas Tech is going to be pretty good, and I want to back them at home. But I think this is short. I think there's still question marks for both, especially for Washington State in this game. But Mateer, I know it was Portland State, but 352, 5 TDs. If they take care of the ball at home, I think they win this game, especially if they could run it on Texas Tech. And one thing with Texas Tech, I want to see more from this defense. I mean, both these defenses were great. Even Portland State moved it a little bit, but it was just kind of a real big blowout. Some of those scores. I mean, when you're up 60, and they have 14, it's like, hey, they get a couple. But yeah, I like Wazoo here. Them at home. This is where place I want to back them. Short number. It seems tricky, and I will dig a little bit more here into this one, but I like them.
All right, Liberty. Here we go. Liberty Flames, 21.5-point road favorites against New Mexico State. 56 the total. How about this as far as where this point spread is? Because if we remember going back to last year, December, these were your two participants of the Conference USA Championship game. And the point spread in that game was only 10. And, of course, Liberty did win and cover 49-35, but they were only a 10-point favorite. Now they're 21.5 in a true road game here against New Mexico State. But you understand why that is. New Mexico State lost just a ton, the majority of their team from last year, majority of the coaching staff. Your old friend, C-Mac, and everybody's old friend in Las Vegas, Tony Sanchez, back in the fold.
Tony Sanchez,
the head coach here for New Mexico State. And I faded his ass last week in his coaching debut, taking the points with SEMO, Southeast Missouri, and wire-to-wire point spread cover. You just can't trust a team that lost so much like New Mexico State to be almost double-digit favorites, even against a plotting, and they are plotting, FCS team in SEMO. And sure enough, they just escaped with the win. If not for a good fourth quarter, they would have lost that game because they were trailing 13-10 going into the fourth quarter, New Mexico State. So easy winner there with Southeast Missouri State plus the points. You're getting now 21.5, so different point spread range. And look, Liberty, for what we expect this team to dominate Conference USA. There was not a ton dominant about the game against Campbell. They won, but they didn't come close to covering, 41-24. It took a while for even that great Caden Salter-led Liberty offense to get going, quite honestly, against Campbell last week. That being said, they won by 14 last year against New Mexico State in the championship game of Conference USA, and this is still a very good Liberty team, and that was a New Mexico team that was much better than this current version of New Mexico State. So I can't get there with New Mexico State. I don't know if I'm rushing to lay this number with Liberty, though, so as of now, I'm not involved in this game. C-Mac, what do you think?
Yeah, the biggest with Liberty is they could just run it. They just run it down your throat. Last week they had like 2-6. All last year they did with Salter. The problem here with New Mexico State, I'm not the biggest Sanchez backer. Even as a dog, when he coached back at UNLV, awful record. They don't have a quarterback play. They don't know who's in. It was awful last week. We ran 60 yards. They're going to try to run it. Can they do that and protect it a little bit at home? I think so. I like them. It's just Liberty, I think, is going to be able to move the ball and score. At will, it may be. But that's a lot here on the road. I lean the dog here in the Mexico State. It's ugly. Ugly. But the dog here.
Thank you to Myron for pointing out, and because we were supposed to talk about this game earlier in the games order, but we skipped it accidentally, so we'll talk about it now. Virginia and Wake Forest. Wake Forest, 2-point home favorites, 54 the total in this game. You look, I like the decision Tony Elliott made at quarterback with Calandria. I think he gives them long-term greater upside, greater production at quarterback than the Musket man. Tony Musket. So I understand why he went this direction. He looked pretty good against a solid Richmond team out of the FCS. 17 of 23, 297 through the air. I like Calandria, and he showed signs of what he could do last year. Wake Forest rolls past NCA&T, who aren't that good, so not much to take of that. I'm still not sold on Hank Bachmeier. I know he was solid last week in his Wake Forest debut. How many programs now has this guy been at? Because he's just not been good enough to stick anywhere. So I'm not sold on Hank Bachmeier. I honestly lean Virginia here, quite honestly. I definitely feel a little higher on Calandria than I do Bachmeier, who's been around the block. We'll see how this one goes. And look, when you talk about competition last week, Virginia played a tougher team than Wake did, even though Virginia played the FCS team, and because Richmond's a capable FCS team. So, I lean Virginia here a little bit as a slight dog. C-Mac, what do you think?
Yeah, when you had this down, I was kind of glad you skipped it, because I don't really want to bet this game at all. I don't have enough trust in Virginia. I think this game's just almost about a pick 'em. I mean, everything from the defense to the offense, it's similar. And I don't have enough trust, with Wake with Bachmeier. Even though him at home, I think, is a little bit, they could lose this. So definitely one I'm off.
By the way, you go back to last year. Don't look now. Virginia's on a nice little 8-2 against the spread run.
They were good last
year, Virginia. So they've been undervalued a little bit. And look,
and Wake was awful to the end of last year. I mean, they lost 4 or 5 straight, or 5 of 6 against the number.
Yeah, this is dog or pass for me. If it's Virginia, I'm not laying it with Wake here in this one. All right, next up as we continue along here, we've got Oregon State and San Diego State. Oregon State 5.5-point road favorites, 55 being the total here in this game. Of course, kind of a starting over for Oregon State. Coach gone, new personnel all over on both sides of the football after Jonathan Smith departed. So it's going to be a little bit of a gradual process here undergoing here for Oregon State. We'll see how they fare here on the road, making the trip to San Diego for this game. I think importantly, what you want to look at here for Oregon State is, the one thing about them is, they've been well coached the last few years. Could they still be that way this year? I was not impressed with the game necessarily against Idaho State for Oregon State. 38-15 was the final score. Giovanni McCoy, the new quarterback, was solid. They were able to run the football. They did put up almost 500 yards in that game. But even in that game, it took a while to pull away. That was a 17-9 football game at halftime. So it really wasn't overly impressive for Oregon State. And I'll tell you right now, they're not a team I'm looking to lay 5.5 with on the road with all the roster turnover, new coaching staff. But here's the problem. And even though I kind of lean San Diego State because I like Sean Lewis, gosh, that was not good for a large part of that game for San Diego State. It took them until the second half to get going. They didn't do anything on offense in the first half against A&M Commerce at home. But I will say this, once they got it going, and look, we're talking about a team that's been a plodding, run-heavy, slow, methodical offense for years, trying to learn this hyper-speed, up-tempo, throw-it-all-around offense that Sean Lewis brings with him from Kent State and Colorado with Dion here to San Diego. And there's going to be an adjustment, but it looks like they started to figure it out, C-Mac, in the second half, because in the second half, they couldn't be stopped. And the new starting quarterback, Danny O'Neal, got it going, 22 of 33. They ran the football. Marquez Cooper had an outstanding game running the football for San Diego State, especially in the second half when they got it going. Maybe that can carry over into this game, but I haven't bet it yet. I think if it hits 7, I've got to take San Diego State. It hasn't gotten there yet, but it's hitting 6 now, it looks like. And if it goes any higher, I might grab a little Aztecs. I still think San Diego State's an over team. The question is, can Oregon State do enough on offense? But to me, the defense is still a little shaky for San Diego State. And we know they're going from one of the slowest paced teams in college football on offense to one of the fastest paced teams. And you can take advantage of that with their totals like I did last week. Didn't look good when it was fucking 6-3 at halftime. But sure enough, it still went over the total of 57. That San Diego State, Texas A&M Commerce game last week, 45-14, 59 points. It did find its way over the total. That would be the look for me over. I think there's value with overs for the foreseeable future with San Diego State until there's enough of an adjustment. Again, talking about an offense that was dinosaur offense, 80s offense the last several years, and now they're finally getting with the times, throwing the ball more, playing fast, and I don't know if it'll be reflected in the totals right away for the Aztecs. C-Mac, what do you think?
Yeah, Oregon State, both these teams a little bit asleep. Oregon State gave us points, but they just ran the rock, 362. And San Diego State, I know Neal was all right with 214, some of that late, but they had a ton on the ground. Cooper had 223. I don't trust their offense. I don't know enough digging into these defense, and it's a little too early. But, and you might be right. When I see these teams get together in this number, I on under. under. I just haven't seen enough them consistent. And they played 2 bad teams. Idaho State a little bit better than Texas Commerce, but I think they're going a little bit off that, and I thought this total was high, so I like the under.
That's the caveat to even though San Diego State's playing fast and the offense should be better, their offense took until the second half to get going against A&M Commerce. And, that's a bit of a concern, especially now look, with all the Oregon State's issues and a new look rebuilt team. Maybe they struggle here. We'll have to wait and see. Mississippi State and Arizona State. Arizona State, 6.5-point home favorite, 60 the total. Of all teams, believe it or not, everyone's talking about how great Notre Dame looked and Miami and USC and go on Penn State. You go on down all the teams people thought looked great. How about Arizona State? I know it was Wyoming. It wasn't one of the more marquee games last week, but they beat the shit out of Wyoming in that game. They whipped them on both sides of the ball at the line of scrimmage, offense and defense. They made life miserable for Swoboda. They couldn't talk enough about how much they trusted Swoboda on offense, the new quarterback for Wyoming, and he was god-awful. And Arizona State was a big part in making him look awful. He was wretched in that game. Meanwhile, on offense, I was very impressed with the Sun Devils. Balance, they could run it. Scadaboo is one of the great name, by the way, one of the better running backs in college football, quite honestly. And this kid that they found at quarterback, Sam Levitt, I was impressed. Accurate, only 8 incomplete passes, 258 through the air. They've got better receivers, including Kyson Brown than you would think. Kyson Brown, I mean, very impressed with Arizona State. That was 48-7 over a very sturdy, solid Wyoming team. And they just put the boots to them. I had to definitely upgrade Arizona State after that win. And keep in mind, for as bad as Arizona State has been over the years, the end of the Herm Edwards era, when he left the program in a state of disarray, and Kenny Dillingham, the new head coach, second year now, had to pick up the pieces. And yes, at the beginning of last year, it was rough for Arizona State. They did get better down the stretch. They did get more competitive in certain games down the stretch. They battled Washington pretty tough. They took Cal to the wire. They battled USC tough. They beat Washington State outright as dogs. They beat UCLA on the road outright as dogs. They've definitely improved down the stretch. And maybe they're going to make a bigger leap this year in year 2 than I thought. I was thoroughly impressed with the Sun Devils. So much so I laid the points with them here against Mississippi State, honestly. I think there's a reason that this team, even being in the Big 12, expected to be a lower tier Big 12 team, is favored over an SEC team. I think for Mississippi State, there's a lot of work that needs to be done for Jeff Levy. And okay, they looked all right last week, 56-7, pretty good against Eastern Kentucky. Eastern Kentucky's not a great FCS team. Blake Shapen, let's see it now on the road against an Arizona State team that defensively whipped Wyoming on the line of scrimmage. Let's see if Blake Shapen, the Mississippi State quarterback, transfer from Baylor, can hold up to that. Yeah, anything less than a touchdown, it's Arizona State for me. C-Mac, what do you think?
Yeah, I love they had big game. Wyoming looked horrible. And, we got to it. Wyoming a little bit different on the road. We talked about it last week. Watched that with them. Now, I didn't think they were going to get their ass ripped like that. That was tough. And it was, they couldn't throw it. Turnovers, 2 picks. They had a fumble loss. It just kills you. And Arizona State just went wrong. Levitt looked really, really good. They got some solid receivers. I like this team. And I thought their defense last year was what I liked the most. Like, you know what I mean? And why they covered some of those games, like you were talking about. And they looked great last week. This one would be easy for Mississippi State, which I still have a bunch of question marks. They beat Eastern Kentucky 56-7. Shapen looked all right. Eastern Kentucky, not very good. And not easy travel in this one. I don't mind you taking Arizona State, under the touchdown. I don't know how much I really want to bet this team, but it's under the TD, so I get it.
All right, our final game for this week's edition of Hitting the Books, Utah State and USC. USC back in the Coliseum, 28.5-point home favorites, 63 the total in this game. Right now, this is a clear, easiest pass on the board for me from a side perspective. I ain't laying 28.5 with USC after the big win against LSU. Now coming back home, a lesser opponent. That's just not the spot and the price you want to be buying on USC after a win like that. But I was very impressed, obviously. Miller Moss looked outstanding. They have 2 phenomenal receivers that did a significant damage against LSU's defense that are going to be a nightmare to deal with all year in Kyron Hudson, who had the highlight reel catch, and, of course, Zachariah Branch, who is a speed demon. Not to mention what Lake McCree and Jacoby Lane and some of these other receivers are capable of. Deuce Robinson for USC. And then, of course, they found a running back that could be pretty solid in Woody Marks as well. So great. The offense looks fine. What was impressive was the defense and the strides they made. Let's give credit to the new DC hire there, Danton Lynn, who looked pretty solid there, and key stops when they needed it, including that big hold holding LSU to a field goal there in the final couple minutes there in the fourth quarter, which allowed USC to keep the game tied and then go down the field. So definitely liked what I saw from USC, but it's not exactly a bet on spot. They do play Michigan after this, but it's after a bye week. So it's bye week after this, and then they go to Michigan, USC. So it's not the worst look-ahead spot. Definitely a Utah State spot based on USC maybe let down. But here's the problem with Utah State. I bet against them last week. They had a disastrous offseason. The Anderson got dismissed. They had to rush in a brand new coach. The quarterback position, I think, is in shambles for Utah State. The defense isn't that good. They 36-14 against Robert Morris, not a great team. And by the way, they still gave up almost 400 yards to Robert Morris. Now they gained over 600, but still, I'm not a big fan of the Bryson Barnes Utah transfer, who wasn't great there at quarterback, or Spencer Petras, the Iowa transfer, who's never been a quarterback that's impressed me for Utah State. So I don't know if I can trust them enough, even getting all these points. So it's a pass for me right now. C-Mac, what do you think? Utah State, USC.
Yeah, I don't know if I want to get involved because I don't know if I can trust Utah State. This is a ton. I think they could score enough. I thought SC Stevens they made some great plays, especially in that second half. They saved up 300 passing. They gave up 100 rushing. And Utah State, the problems is the quarterback. Both those guys they threw it. Robert Morris is awful, but 3 picks between the two of them. I know they both threw for over, 180 apiece. But who's it going to be? Barnes, Petras? I don't think they know at all. And their defense was awful. It seems like SC is just going to go up and down the field here. Maybe look over their team total over in this one.
All right, there you have it, guys.
And Miller Moss was great. They got great receivers, which some talent there with Hudson, Robinson. There's some really good things going on at SC.
There sure is. There's good things going on with this show as well, and we appreciate everybody that joins us each and every week for Hitting the Books. We will be back on Monday next week, 1 p.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Pacific, and every Monday the rest of the college football season with Hitting the Books. Shout out to everyone in the chat. We'll get the individual game preview clips posted later in the week as YouTube allows. Hit the like button. 162 live viewers right now. We shouted out everyone in the chat, but again, you know who you are. Paul, Nasty Nate, Robert Franklin, Chosen One, Ice X, Myron, Gold Jew. You go on down the list, Bama Boy, everyone in the chat. Earlier on, Ixnizzle, like I said, Joseph Thompson, Al, definitely Kevin MVP, Kongs Clips. We appreciate all you guys joining us. C-Mac, final thoughts before we wrap the show up.
Nothing. Let's have a great week. This is always a great week. A little bit the overreaction to this. A lot of cupcake wins. It's a tougher competition. So keep that in mind as you're going through these games. It's a big week for me to dig even more into that with some of these games. But it should be a ton of fun. Let's keep rolling. Let's keep winning. And I'll see you next week, Monday, in the books.
No doubt. We appreciate everyone joining us for another edition of Hitting the Books. Hit the like button. Tell your friends. Subscribe to the channel. Let's get the subscribe count up. Exactly.
Hit the like and subscribe. That's all I ever ask. Nothing more.
Nothing more than that. Exactly. And but thanks to everyone that's watching on Twitter, X, Facebook, YouTube, you name it. We appreciate it very much. For Connor Mack, I'm Ian Cameron. This has been another edition of the College Football Hitting the Books show. Class dismissed.